Okay, so I've started recording, and this is the session on essay writing. So how you begin, or the essay writing process. So how you begin is you take your task sheet, whether you want to do something like this in OneNote or whether you want to print it off. When you print it, if you print it off, you're going to need like some colored pens and highlighters or something, because typically I like to do things in a different color. That's what's recommended. So basically, yeah, you read everything, all of these instructions. You know, it's going to be 1,000 words. You read the quotes and you think, you know, you have a short think about them. But let's say you're at fairly early on in the process and you're not really quite sure what you think yet. Well, that doesn't mean you can't figure out what you need to do, even if you haven't figured out what you think yet. Suppose I'm picking essay topic 1, and I'm going to do this for essay topic 2 as well. What you do is you go through and you highlight all of like the research words. In other words, these are the kinds of things which you need to research or you need to understand. And that would be like how an inductivist might respond to this claim regarding falsification and knowledge, right? Then the next part would be like, what extent inductivists and Popperians have mutually exclusive ideals of what makes science rational. And you don't have to highlight as much as I am, you know, just as much as you feel like you need to, or whether they are in some way complementary. Okay. And you don't have to do all the research words first and then all the task verbs second. You can, you know, do it all as you go. But now I'm going to go through, and I always make sure to do this really neatly. It's just that I'm using it like a different OneNote version because the other one's being buggy when I run it together with Zoom. So this one doesn't have like a ruler and stuff for me to make sure it's all neat and like all the shapes and stuff. But then you circle all of the task verbs. All right. So explain. And now you have explain and you have justify. All right. Then typically what you would do, and you're not going to have to do it because I'm just going to tell you the answer, is that your university would have like this is kind of a convention like all over the world at universities. Your university will have a like some document that's, you know, officially that university's document, and you know it's usually like an academic writing convention document, and what you do is you consult that and you look up the words, you know, explain and justify, because often they'll have like very specific fleshed out meanings, you know, that would be like words like critically evaluate will be different to critically assess or something like that in some disciplines, and at different universities the meanings change. So you look up that document for your university. So you look up UQs, and I haven't looked in many years because I've just gotten used to what the different task verbs are in philosophy, and you keep getting the same ones. But I remember UQs used to be very difficult to find, and it wasn't like all that well organized when I did find it. But I haven't looked for it in years. I happen to think that UQ is a way better university than QUT, but I did find QUT's academic writing convention book, and like they just give every student one when they enroll there, and I thought that QUT's was much better, even though I think overall it's much better to come to UQ. Anyways, so there's a little bit in there where it's like, do you agree with this response that I haven't highlighted? And that's because it's kind of obvious. when you write an essay, that you tell people what you think, whether you agree with stuff or disagree with stuff. You're arguing. Just gonna check the chat. How was my dinner cooked by the kids? So they did like an Uber Eats thing and pretended they cooked it, and they thought that I didn't know. The Uber Eats was actually delicious. I don't know where it came from, like, and I don't know how Uber Eats works because I'm not a cool kid. I just know that they deliver food. So I don't know if they have a relationship with different restaurants and stuff and deliver food or what, but it's just Uber Eats. I know they're the people that knock on your door and give you something to eat. And oh, it wasn't at my place, and they weren't my kids. Yeah, but I'll get back to that in a sec. I don't have any kids. But yeah, it was so good. It was so good. Unbelievably good. It had like almonds in it and this like tangy sauce and stuff. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, so I would screen share it. But are you referring to screen share for OneNote? Yeah, thank you. Didn't realize I wasn't sharing. Okay, so if you can't see it yet, it's just loading. But where I've highlighted in blue, basically what I'm saying is that you read all this stuff, right? Because it's important, but what's really the nuts and bolts is what I've done down here. So I've gone through and I've highlighted like all the research information, okay? That's stuff you have to think about. That's stuff that you have to find out, either from doing research or by thinking in your head and coming to a position, a view, your own view. And what I've done in red is I've highlighted the task verbs or task words. So the task words tell you what to do. And with those task words, that's where I was talking about, universities having their own book, their own text, their own document that defines how a whole faculty or a whole university uh, use these terms. But you don't have to do that. I'm just saying that in case you go on to postgraduate studies somewhere, that will be the case often. And yeah, explain here. The reason you don't have to do that is it really just means in the everyday sense explain. Like if someone didn't know the rules of chess, you explain them. You explain the rules, and then they do understand. Okay, it's just straightforwardly explain. I don't know what the thing is, and you're going to explain to me what the thing is. Second task verb is another explain, and the third task verb is justify. Okay. So justify really just means, for our purposes, don't be just arbitrary and dogmatic. In other words, don't tell us what your view is without giving us reasons. Justify is just the demand for reasons. You can't just tell us what your view is. It has to have basis. You have to have reasons for holding the view. Okay, so I'm just going to open the console a bit so I can see everyone a bit more clearly. Can I just get a thumbs up from people as to whether that's all clear? Cool. Unfortunately, I think I can't see everyone. But yeah, I think lots of people are giving thumbs up. All right, now I'm going to do essay task 2. And typically you use like a different color for the research information, a different color for the task verbs. So this time I'm going to do it all in one go. Okay. So I haven't read the sentence yet, but I see that there's an explain. So I'm going to put a circle around explain. And then, the more experience you get with this, the more you be comfortable just skipping a bunch of words and highlighting the nitty gritty. So I'm going to just highlight Kunian might respond. falsification and knowledge. So maybe I'd highlight claim as well. The do you agree with this response part, that is important, but it's just very obvious. You know, it's very obvious that in an essay, you wouldn't say, you know, Einstein believed that tea was better than coffee and Newton believed that coffee was better than tea, and then just leave it at that. Okay. You would launch into an argument and support one of the views, attack one of the views, come to a compromise between them, something like that. So I'm not going to highlight, do you agree with this response? Okay. Then I see that there's a task verb, and that's explain. So I do this. This seems like straightforward and obvious. Maybe it feels like a little bit of child's play, but it keeps you on track and you keep looking at it. When you feel like you're getting off topic, you look at it and your eyes dart to the red circles and the yellow highlighting. Explain and justify. Well, your answer. Because that's one of the important things you have to figure out. Your answer. That's why I highlighted that. And then in doing so, consider to what extent Kuhnians and Popperians have mutually exclusive views. And then I'll highlight rationality of science. And then I might highlight or some way complementary. Right? So this might seem like child's play, but a lot of people are stressed about this and talking about how they're struggling with where to start and the essay writing structure and stuff like that. And a lot of people seem like they're on track pretty well. You know, it's a mixed bag. It's pretty 50-50. And we appreciate this as tutors, that this is hard, okay? I know that if there was like a second year philosophy course running and then all of a sudden halfway through, we were just like, yeah, do this biology assignment and you'll get 4 lectures on biology and a tutorial, they would all be pulling their hair out, okay? So you science students are smarter than us philosophy students, because philosophy students, they would just, yeah, they'd roll over and die. Now you can do the same with this. Okay, it's not like you're going to put too much info on the page and too much highlighting or anything like that, because these are instructions too. So you might want to do something with the NB paragraph, because that's important. That's instructions for how your essay is meant to be written. But when you come back and look to get yourself grounded again, because you were worried that you were getting off topic, this is what you look at, what I've done here. Okay, you look at that, and it won't be that, it will be like one of them, obviously, because you must do one and only one. So you'll do that, or you'll do that. Okay, notice that each question has 2 explains in it and 1 justify in it. So there's like a one-to-one function from the number of explains and justifies in this set of explains and justifies, and in this set there's a one-to-one function that way and there's a one-to-one function that way. That's not a coincidence. So in each essay question, it's 2 things you got to explain. One of them's to do with the views, one of the explains is to do with your answer, and the justify is to do with your answer. So why 2 tasks verbs for your answer? Explain and justify. Well, let's not overcomplicate it. It's very straightforward. Explain just means, well, you got to tell me what it is. If you haven't told me what it is, you can't justify it. Okay? And the justify bit just means you got to have reasons for that being your view. Okay? So imagine you're a naughty kid and you're playing up, you know, when you're, I don't know, in primary school, and one of your parents gets angry and says, don't do that, behave. And you say, why? What's wrong with it? They say, because I told you so. That kind of reasoning is unacceptable. That's what's meant by the, it's a lack of reasoning, you know? It's not a kind of reasoning, it's complete lack of reasoning. Okay, so that's the justified. It can't just be dogmatic and arbitrary, and it can't just be, you know, I think this, that's it. All right, you need to provide reasons. So let's look at this NB stuff. So this part here, the most important part in the NB is just clear, concise, on topic. All right. This stuff here is important to keep in mind because it's just freaking true. Okay. So you may not be able to say all that you want to. I would say, like, if I wrote this, I would just change the word may to like won't. You won't. You straight up will not. Okay. If you were the king of writing essays, 1,000 words is not enough to say everything you think. All right. So if you've got 3 body paragraphs in a 1,000 word essay, and one of them is dedicated to raising and dismissing an objection, that means you've only got 2 body paragraphs left over, and each body paragraph discusses one and only one topic. That's how you stay on topic. You dedicate each paragraph to one topic, and you're left with 2 because one of those 3 slots is taken up by an objection. So with 2 topics to bring up, 300, 255 to 300 word paragraphs, that's just a rule of thumb. It's not set in stone. You definitely will not be able to say all that you want to. Okay. And sometimes you have a burning desire to include it. You won't. You're going to have to prioritize and include what's most important to your argument. And there's going to be stuff that's relevant to your argument, and you won't have the space to include it. Okay. But this can be done because 1,000 words and 1,200 words, those are the standard word counts for all first year philosophy course essays, and those students write the essays. It can be done. All right. And it's no feat either. It's very achievable. All right. In fact, I'm going to pause here to ask you all a question, and people can try to answer in the chat. Why do you think courses give students essay writing tasks with word limits that seem too small for the task? With word count limits that seem like they're not enough. So I'm just going to open up chat to see what people think. And while I'm waiting for people to respond, in response to Lisa, oh, well, Lisa answered. Yeah. So they are short and succinct. Mary says, want to be concise as possible. Yeah. Okay. These things are skills, and skills don't just magically manifest. Less reading for them. Well, actually, that's actually a good point you bring up. I know you're kind of joking, but there is something in that, which I'll get to in a sec. Gian Hall, it shows that you have a good understanding of the task and know what not to include. Yep, you are correct too. Yeah, so you've all given good answers, and even Lisa, I don't know if you were like serious or joking. Your answer before where you said, it helps us become, concise, helps us learn to write concisely and succinctly. And then you said it's less reading for the markers. Well, actually, the word count sometimes is influenced by funding. So every department, gets a certain amount of funding, and the university pays people according to how much time they spend having to help students and mark the essays. I don't get paid for any of this extra stuff. I just do it because like I like seeing students do well, and like I enjoy philosophy. So if I wasn't doing this, I'd be reading a philosophy book. So don't worry, it's not like anyone's stealing my time or anything. And the more I do it, the better I get at my job. So, but yeah, some like university departments have funding, and sometimes they won't have enough money to pay like markers for all of the marking time. So they'll have to reduce because there'll be too many students with too many essays. So they reduce the word count. So sometimes it's not to do with succinctness and being concise, but inside 1000, that's not what's going on. So yeah, Lisa, you kind of hit on something there with the half joke. Yeah, in Psalm 1000, that's not what's going on. It's been 1,000 words ever since the dawn of time. When there were heaps of tutors, when there were barely any, it's always been 1,000. Yep. So writing succinctly and concise. Well, these words have completely different meaning. What's the meaning of concise? It's like using the words with the correct meaning to get across what you're trying to say. Like picking the right word. That's what concise means. Picking the right word, choosing your words carefully. Whereas succinct is like the opposite of wordy. So succinct is like saying more with less words. Okay, you know how there's some people and they can write and it's like there's a lot of text there but not much is being said. That's wordy writing. That's waffling on. Succinct is getting a lot said with as small a words as you can. In other words, being economical with words and efficient. Yep. So yeah, with John saying like, it shows that you have a good understanding of the task and know not what to include. Yeah. In order to know what's important in an argument, that helps you know what's not important, right? Or in other words, if you know what is important, then if you know what's not important, then you know what is important. Yeah. Yeah, so that's true, what you say, Lisa. So we get allocated a time, and it's like uh, I think it's like 20 minutes or 15 minutes per essay to mark. Like that's how it all gets added up. But all the tutors spend like at least 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes on an essay. The better the essay it is, the easier it is to mark because the marking is just like, yep, you hit this criteria. Yep, you hit this criteria. Yep, you hit this criteria. And you get less feedback because there's not all that much to say other than you did really good. But essays that are not of a good standard are the ones that take much longer. Those are the ones that can take like up to an hour. So some essays will take like 15 minutes to mark, and some will take like an hour to mark if they're not very good, because you've got to give all of the feedback, and you've got to explain why it didn't get a higher grade basically. Is that University of Southern California, USC? Oh, Sunshine Coast, right. My bad. Yeah, I would believe that. Okay, so yeah, that thing that I underlined in green there, you won't be able to get, you won't be able to say everything that you want, including stuff that is relevant. So Gian summed that up nicely. Okay, so point two, yeah, you're not going to be penalized for drawing only on the lecture notes. Further research may help you. It might help you better understand. And if you think if you think that will, like, you know how you learn pretty well. So I won't tell you whether it's a good idea or not to go and do further research. Because if you're feeling like there's a lot to understand, then going and doing further research might clarify it, but it also might just give you more stuff that confuses you as well. Okay. And it's going to be hard to find like introductory books that are free, like online. Like UQ library would probably be pretty good, but you know, the best books that I would recommend, I'm not sure if they're free online. The best introductory ones, and you know, you don't want to read ones that are written for philosophers because it will be it will be really complex. You know, they're written for philosophers that, you know, have their PhDs and are already working. But if you do go looking for extra literature, okay, make sure to just focus on key points, right? Because remember, it's not heaps of different things that you have to understand. It's actually a small number of things that you have to understand. It's just that those things are pretty complicated, right? So don't go looking up heaps of stuff. Okay, how many things do you have to understand if you're doing essay task 1? Inductivism and falsificationism. It's 2 things. It doesn't seem like 2 things because when we're talking about it, where it seems like we're going all over the place and we're discussing all these different issues. Okay, but it's 2 things. Okay, it's just that those 2 things can be complex. There are simple ways of explaining complex things, and that's what gets you the marks for understanding. If you can take something that's complicated and explain it really simply, Einstein actually said that that was like the mark of understanding. Like if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. Yeah, so explain falsification really simply and inductivism really simply. So that's key points. There's really only like 2 points. The things you need to understand. The rest is figuring out what you think and what your view is. If you're doing essay question 2, then what's key points? Key points is going to be Kuhn's view and falsificationism, Popper's view, right? And Popper's method. I'm going to just stop sharing for a second because when I stop sharing, I can see all of the participants. No, that's not true. I had some feature where I toggled it and I could see everyone really well. Like as in not their webcams, I could just see their names. So I need to figure out how to do that again because that's where I can see like people giving thumbs up and stuff. Anyways, can like some people just give a thumbs up to say that, like, that, you know, they're with me, and that's, yeah, cool. All right, great. Yeah, and an example of explaining falsificationism really simply is just that falsification is the view that we should try to deductively falsify hypotheses rather than prove them. Bam. You've taken a complex view that required a whole book like this big to justify, and like a bunch of math and formal logic and all of this symbology. You've explained it in a single sentence. That will impress your marker, right? Uh, Inductivism is the view that we can uh, arrive at laws of nature via inductive inferences and then prove them to be true by, you know, like inferring predictions from the law using deduction and then submitting them to experimental tests. You know, that's a little bit wordier than explaining Popper, but it's not all that complicated. You know, at least the sentence isn't all that complicated. So yeah, that gets you marks for understanding, is explaining stuff in really simple, clear language. Do not try to sound smart. Okay, do not try to use complex words and sound really smart. What that will do is several things, and none of them are good. One of them is that you will end up being vague, unclear, sometimes ambiguous. and your tutor will not know whether you really understand or not. And in those scenarios, they tend not to give the benefit of the doubt. They don't give out marks for understanding unless they can understand what you are saying too. Okay. The understanding part is a two-way street. You have to understand the content, and I have to understand what you're saying about the content. I might not be the one who marks your essays. It's really random, like which essays I mark. So it's not just like whoever's in my workshops. But yeah, use the simplest language you can. And in the video that I make tomorrow, so it won't count as content or anything. It's just like an extra thing where I like write an essay from scratch. I'll write a 1,000 word essay. The first draft will be garbage, and I'll be like simplifying the language. Okay, and you'll be laughing at me. I'll be saying stupid stuff. Okay, but then the second draft, it'll sound a little less dumb, and then the third draft, maybe it'll sound decent. Okay, and I'm not like rewriting drafts every time. I'm like proofreading, editing, fooling around with sentences, realizing one sentence should really be put in another paragraph, that kind of thing. Okay, so anyways, yeah, make sure you reference. One of the students asked before whether we had to reference because all we had to do was we didn't have to research outside of the lecture notes. Make sure you do, because it's actually on the criteria sheet under, you know, like spelling and grammar, bibliography, and referencing. Yeah, so referencing style. So it says any standard referencing convention is acceptable, but what isn't acceptable is that it isn't consistent. So you can't use like Chicago 16th part of the way through using footnotes, and then like somewhere else use Harvard in-text citations, or like, you know, APA, which is American Psychological Association, or something like that, right? You can't have like a bibliography at the end that's in like APA format, but the in-text citation is in something else. You know, your tutor might not notice if you do that. They might not care, but it's not good practice either. So whichever one you choose the one that's easiest for you and most consistent. Your markers will prefer Chicago 16th, like any kind of footnotes referencing style, they prefer that. That's pretty standard in philosophy, footnotes referencing, but you don't have to. If you're more comfortable with in-text referencing, that's fine. The reason they prefer footnotes is because the in-text referencing breaks up the readability for the reader. So you'll be reading part of the argument, then all of a sudden there's these brackets, and it breaks up the sentence, and your eyes run over the citation, and then read the second half of the sentence, you know, if the citation was halfway through the sentence, for example. Whereas footnotes, it's just a number, superscript attached to a word or the end of the sentence, and it doesn't really interfere with the readability. But yeah, you're not going to get marked down either way. You know, it's just that if you ask what philosophers prefer, that's my answer. All right, make sure you submit the right file. Okay. Um, so I'm trying to scroll on OneNote, and it won't, like the bar's moving and the thing won't. But that's all I wanted to say, I think, about the task sheet. I'm just gonna grab the can someone drop the like the rubric in the chat? Because I just got locked out of staff Blackboard because I got my password wrong. So if you can drop the rubric in the chat, and then I'll download it. I'll show you something really cool. And it may change how comfortable you're feeling about this task. Thanks, Lisa. You're a legend. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to start sharing a PDF, which is the rubric. Okay. Cool. So, can everyone see? Excellent. I'm just going to see if my Surface Pen works on here. No, it doesn't seem to work on PDF. Ah, there's like a highlighter. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be what I want. Yeah, anyway, sorry for not being all that tech savvy, but anyways, if you look here, outlining the case to make, 10%, essay structure and clarity, 30%. Well, I have to read your essay to see whether, it's got good structure and whether it's clear, and your understanding of concepts, which is 30%. I have to read the essay to know whether you understand the concepts. But notice the length, which is 10%, I don't have to read your essay. So that's at the bottom. The length is 10%. 10% of the overall mark, and it's a 1,000 word essay where you're allowed this 10% plus or minus margin either side. So you won't get penalized if you stay within 1,100 words, and you won't get penalized if you make it over 900 words but you don't get to 1,000. Okay, I don't have to read your essay to give you full marks, so long as I know that you are within 900 to 1,100 words. I can give you 10 marks for lengths. Okay. Then spelling and grammar, bibliography and referencing. I'm going to run a spell checker. I haven't read your essay yet. Suppose I've got your essay and I'm about to mark it. I'm going to run a spell checker through Word, just the typical spell checker. And then I might run it through Grammarly. And if it, Grammarly always picks stuff up. But that's just sort of like preference stuff. The way Grammarly would rather have said something. Okay, Grammarly is another like spell checking software that's better than the word processor one. There's a comment in the chat. Yeah, if you include like information or ideas that aren't your own, yeah, you're gonna have to reference them, and they'll have to appear in your bibliography. Yeah. The Sci 1000 lecture notes, if you rely on just them for referencing, then yeah, they'll have to appear in your bibliography as well. Oh, so you're talking about, like, let's suppose you go and read some of Popper's book, and that helped you understand, but you didn't really rely on anything you read in that book in your argument, and you didn't use Yeah, that's what you mean. Yeah, no, you don't have to do that. You wouldn't have to cite that. But yeah, if there's any ideas in there that aren't your own, um, and you've included them, yeah, you're gonna have to cite that and reference it. Yeah, good question, Lisa. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna run it through like Grammarly, and then if it doesn't come back with any errors, significant errors, then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to give you full marks for spelling, grammar, bibliography, and referencing. I'll obviously run my eyes over your bibliography and your referencing too, but then I'll just give you the 20 marks for that. And I'm not going to subtract any marks unless I find one, and between us, I kind of ignore one or two. And when it gets to the third one, it's like, okay, I'm gonna dock a mark, right? So yeah, if you just stay within the length, okay, make sure your spelling and grammar, your bibliography, and your referencing is on point. You've got 30% of the essay. You've got 30% of the marks, and I haven't even read it yet. I can give you a full 30 marks before I've read a single word. Okay? Then, outlining the case to make, that's 10%. That's your introduction. So I'm going to read your introduction. That's like 100 words. Okay? And so long as you hit that stuff in the 7 box, then I can give you 10%. So all I've read is 100 words of your essay, and you could potentially have 40% of the mark already. Now, you just have to manage to get another 10% out of essay structure. You need to manage to get another 10 marks out of the 30 available for essay structure and clarity, and out of the 30 available for understanding and concepts. All right. So if you can spell, if you can reference, and if you can tell me what you are going to argue, in other words, give me a thesis statement, you could have 40 marks and you're 10 away from passing. And I haven't read your essay. I've just read the introduction. So I'm going to pause there to let that sink in so that you can realize how much you can do this. And perhaps that it was a bit easier to do well on this than you may have thought, or at least to pass it. Okay? How many people we got? Okay. So, if I could get some feedback in the chat, is that surprising? Or, does that put the mind at ease, make people feel a bit more comfortable? Great. And this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for me to look at the essay and be like, yeah, they're within the length. They're somewhere between 900 words and 1100 words. Bang, 10 marks. I didn't find a spelling mistake. I don't see any like red things underlined. Spell checker doesn't return anything. They didn't make the title of the essay Karl Popper and his shitty scientific method. They're taking this thing seriously. I'll give you 20 marks. So now you got 30. And then you look at the first criteria outlining the case to make. Okay, they wrote an introduction and they gave me a thesis statement. And that this thesis statement indicated they were going to cover all the relevant significant issues in good depth. Hey, even if you actually tell me in the intro that that's what you're going to do, don't literally write, I'm going to cover all of the relevant issues in depth. Don't, that's not what I mean. I'm saying even if you write an introduction that outlines the case to make and like hits all that stuff in the 7 box for the introduction, but then you fail to do that in the body, like you fail to actually cover the relevant issues in depth, you still get that 10% for the intro, because in that first criteria, that 10% is for outlining the case to make, and that's done in the introduction. So you might outline the case to make in the introduction very well, and then you might make a poor case in the rest of the essay, but you're still going to get that full 10% for the intro. So stay within the word count. That's why it's important. Stay within the word count. Get 10% for free. Okay? Spell correctly and reference everything. You get 20% for free. It's a free extra 20%. Now that's 30% for free. Then make sure the intro is good. And that's 40% all up. 30% of it was pretty much for free. Okay? Now we're on to essay structure and clarity, understanding of concepts. Okay, that's 60% of the grade. And you got to get 10% out of that 60. Okay, you got to get 10 marks out of that 60 to get 50% on the essay. I'm sure you can all manage that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to like a 10-minute break, because I insist on the breaks to keep people's brains operating at optimum efficiency, as well as to keep myself at my best. I will probably make some coffee because it's 11:14 and it's a totally normal thing to do at this hour because I'm a totally normal person. And then I'm going to do an essay template in Word. Okay, and the essay template is way more important for keeping you on track than what I did in OneNote with the task sheet. Okay, what I did in OneNote with the task sheet is important. Okay, I implore you to try and come up with a similar system like that for other kinds of assessment, like science reports and things like that. I still do it. There's never been an essay that I didn't do that for. Okay, and I wrote a 1,000 word essay in like a couple of hours. So in one of my courses, every few weeks you have to submit a 1,000 word essay, but they're not really counted as essays because they're kind of just like little small things in a third year philosophy course. And we have a mid-sem essay that's big and a final essay that's big. And yeah, it was like the same day as one of my workshops. I woke up, I already knew what my argument was, and I was just able to follow my understanding of what the research question was and the task verbs, as well as the essay template and structure, and like the thing kind of just wrote itself. Okay, I haven't gotten the mark back from it, but if I scored, let's say if I scored 90% flat, that would be the worst grade I ever got back for an essay. So yeah, like have confidence in like these methods. They aren't throwaway things. They're going to keep you on track and they're going to help you do well. All right, so everyone happy to take a break? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, Mary's on team break. So is Gian. We're all on the same team here. Lisa dropped the criteria sheet in the chat for me, so she's the commander of the team. She's outdone me. All right. I'll be back at 6 or 7 past. Okay, so I forget when I said that I'd be back, but I'm gonna treat it as being in the break, so I can just respond to any questions, queries, doubtful points, concerns students might have, and really just kind of kick it with people for a bit. Someone who I think it was Lisa asked about the dinner with the kids. So what they did was they ordered like a delivery thing like Uber Eats, and I knew they did it, but I think they were passing it off as if they cooked it, and I kind of just went along with, like pretended to think they cooked it, and it was pretty cute. It was like three of them. They're all pretty young. Like the oldest one is in the fifth grade, so it's one of my best friend's kids. You ordered from them tonight. Yeah, I've never had it before. I'm like really behind the times and everything. So actually, a weird fact about me is that I don't use a mobile phone. Yeah. So, um, and that's because like I'm kind of like a bit of a social recluse. I like to sit in a basement and think and like read and crunch math and and then I leave the house to go to campus, obviously not lately. But yeah, like I leave the house to go to campus and I leave the house to like train and practice the sport that I do and I coach. So I do that like at least 2 to 3 times a week, but I try to get as much in as possible. Uh, I was actually going to try and go to Singapore at the end of the year to attend the World Championship trials for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or BJJ for short. It's like a wrestling sport where you have to make your opponent give up. So it kind of looks like judo, but instead of just throwing each other and winning, you have to put the guy in some kind of joint lock or choke and make them like tap out. So maybe you've watched like the UFC or something like that, and you see sometimes they're standing up punching each other, and sometimes they're on the ground wrestling. Well, I specialize in the on the ground wrestling part, and I've been doing that since I was like a kid. I think it's like 14 or 15 years now. And my the best friend uh, whose kids cooked the dinner, it was like my first coach, like my first martial arts teacher. And I met him when I was 9 years old, and he's 10 years older than me. So, and then I went and got another coach uh, and trained with him, and that's the last 14 years. And he's, my other best friend. And with the previous coach, the roles are reversed now. So now he considers me his coach, and it's like it's a very humbling feeling. But yeah, it was his kids. What did you order from Uber Eats? Oh, that is freaking awesome. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. It's been a long time since I've had like ice cream or something sweet, other than like popcorn. I have like this popcorn addiction lately. Mary gets Uber Eats when you get tired of 2 minute noodles. I really need to learn how to cook well because I'm the kind of guy who Google searches how long it takes to cook 2 minute noodles. I got trust issues. It says 2 minutes on the pack, and it's like, I try to submit it to experimental testing and falsify the 2 minute hypothesis. Okay, right. And there's probably like an app too, I bet. You can order Uber Eats off your computer. They have a website. Cool. All right. No. Yeah, I haven't owned a phone, like a smartphone for like uh maybe 4 years now. Yeah. And for most of those years, I was carrying it around just because it like held my cash and card, like the phone holder held my, like my student card, my driver's license, my bank card, but I hadn't turned the phone on in like 3 or 4 years, and it was like perfectly working and functioning. Um, yeah, I just like life that way. But I do have Facebook, so that's how people get into contact with me. Well, yeah, Mary says, I don't know how I will survive without a phone. Well, you just turn it off and then you realize that you don't die when you turn it off. Yep. You have a separate phone case that is your wallet. Yeah. So after I like actually got rid of my phone, I mean, I didn't deliberately get rid of it. It's that I accidentally dropped like a 20 kilogram kettlebell on it. So it was useless. So then I threw it out. But yeah, then I changed to like my old wallet that I hadn't used in ages. Alrighty. I might actually still have like the terribly crushed broken phone. I don't remember if I threw it out. So it might still be here in the house somewhere and it's like terribly crushed. Um, okay. So where was I? I might actually head to my room for this bit rather than the couch so I can work at a table when I type and stuff. Um, because I'm going to be like making a little essay template and I'm going to be talking about sort of how you fill in the template. Alrighty. Yeah, that's a Netflix session. Getting fish and chips and like snack pack and ice cream. Or a Billy Bentley Zoom session. Not as good as Netflix. Unless Netflix starts streaming my tutorials. Yeah, I bet it was amazing. See how much I love you all? I left my couch. I left my couch to sit in a chair. No sacrifice too great. Okay, so um, can you see Word right now or the PDF criteria sheet? PDF. Thanks, John. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so you should be able to see Word soon. And I've just opened up a Word document and I'll give it a title, essay template. Okay, and what I do is I kind of just write it like this in words, default font and text size, and it doesn't really matter whether you want to change things first or change things afterwards. But basically use Times New Roman for your font and use word size like 11 or 12. Uh, and that'll make it look pretty nice. And then it's up to you whether you want to just like have things justified, as in like indented left, centered, or indented right. Like justified is another option where it like stretches the body of the essay so that everything meets the margins and makes it look nice and symmetric. I've read essay writing books that say you should justify. I've read essay writing books that say keep it to the left. Either way is fine. I've never heard any, like I've submitted essays with both because I wanted to test like what people would say when I got my mark back, and no one's ever complained about either. So yeah, it's the essay template, so I'm going to call it. And here I'm going to leave some space and I'm going to write introduction. And now I just write like a word count, 1,000 words. So I know what I have to play with, right? And then under introduction, I go thesis statement. And I put a colon, right? And next to introduction is the word count for the intro. And a good rule of thumb for your introduction is 100 words. You want to keep an introduction short. In the introduction, you just want to raise the issue and then tell them your thesis statement. I will argue that A, B, C, because X, Y, Z, you know, it might not be enough to include one sentence depending on what your argument is. So it might have to be like, furthermore, I will argue that, you know, D, E, you know, because G, right? And then, you know, if that's not enough, right, you might need a third sentence and then say, which might be like, finally, I will argue that alpha, beta, gamma, because, you know, psi, kappa, phi, okay? So, yeah, everything's, you know, I will argue that X, Y, Z because ABC. Additionally, or, you know, furthermore, I will argue that something, something, something because splurg, splurg, splurg. And then, you know, if you need a third sentence, finally, I will argue that whatever, 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 because whichever, 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 right? So I will argue that blah because blurg. That's the form, okay? That's the form of thesis statements. They are explicit, okay? There's no beating around the bush. There's nothing implicit about them. You punch them in the jaw with your thesis statement. That's what you do, okay? And then your thesis statement, well, you're just making a template right now, so you might not know what it is. You might have a rough idea of what it is, but don't care about it for now. Just make your template, because your template reveals to you the entirety of the structure of your essay. It gives it a skeleton, and then you're just filling in all the tissue and organs and, you know, blood and whatever else. Okay, so there's the thesis statement. Then you go down, you leave a bunch of space because you're going to do body template stuff, and you write conclusion. Well, guess what? The conclusion is really just telling the reader what you argued and restating your thesis statement. And many of you will might know why you do that in a conclusion. Some of you might not. You know, I've had students ask, why would you do that? Because that's just repeating yourself, and you're not supposed to repeat yourself in an essay. It's true, you're not supposed to repeat yourself, but if anyone wants to know why in the conclusion you kind of do, it's almost just the introduction given again. I'm happy to talk about that. So in the conclusion, it's just going to be, I have argued that X, Y, Z because blah, blah, blah. Additionally, I argued that such and such because so and so. And then finally, you know, and then you can say, then I raised an objection in the form of blah, 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 and dismissed it on the grounds that yada, yada, yada. You know, then finally I concluded that, okay? So is everyone following me with this kind of language? Great. Great. Okay, and because a conclusion is very similar to an introduction, it's the same with the word count. Logically, if it says more or less the same stuff as an introduction, you would need more or less the same amount of words. Okay, so the rule of thumb for how long a conclusion is 10% of the word count. So that's going to be 1,000 words. Okay, now what you do is you take the total 1,000 words, right? Subtract 100 and subtract another 100. And then you realize you're down to 800 words. That's what you have left for the body. Okay? So for the body, you have about 800 words to play with, right? And a paragraph is typically 300 words. That's just a, like a guideline. How long does a paragraph have to be? Well, each paragraph will develop and discuss one point. Okay? That's how you tell when you need a new paragraph, when you've changed topic. Okay, so each paragraph is dedicated to one topic and one topic only. No multitasking in paragraphs. Okay, so as a guide, you might use something like 300 words per paragraph. It's not actually going to be that. That's just for the purposes of making a model or, a prediction or something. Okay, so 800 divided by 300 is 2.66 recurring. Okay, so that means you're going to have 2 rounding up to 3, 2.66 recurring. I'm going to round that up to 3. You're going to have 3 paragraphs. So body paragraph 1. Body paragraph 2. Body paragraph 3. Okay, and I'm going to separate that body paragraph from the intro. And then close some of that space. Now what I'm going to do here is you see that an introduction has a thesis statement. Well, each body paragraph you can consider as a mini essay. So you consider the 3 body paragraphs. Body paragraph 1 is a tiny essay. It's like a 300-word essay. Okay? Body paragraph 2 is another 300-word essay, and so is body paragraph 3. Okay? Which means the paragraphs individually are themselves going to have their own essay structure contained within them. Okay? But we use different words for things in the paragraph. So rather than thesis statement, it has a topic sentence. Okay? And I put a colon next to topic sentence, just like I put a colon next to thesis statement, because eventually I'm going to fill it in with a topic sentence. All right. After the topic sentence, I write evidence. Okay. Now, you're going to evaluate that evidence. And whenever I fill this in with the evidence, like often I don't fill this part in, I just fill the topic sentence in. But the evidence, I just fill in with this kind of like very surface level bullet point stuff. Okay, I don't welcome Irish. I don't fill this in with, like sentences or anything like that. It'll be like, like just titles, that kind of thing, I might, yeah, I heard that. So you might put like, Kuhn's objection here. And in your mind, that's like Kuhn's objection to Popper or something like that. But yeah, for topic sentence, I don't know what was so funny, but I'd love to hear about it later. Yeah, so I'll put a colon next to topic sentence. Then you've got the evidence. You can't just cite the evidence, you got to evaluate it. But, understand that you don't have much to play with. As in, sorry, you can't just put the evidence in there. You kind of got to evaluate it for its quality. You got to engage with it. In the whole essay, you're engaging with everything and you're arguing, right? And then, at some point, this body paragraph has got to end and we've got to get on to body paragraph 2. So you need a bridge from body paragraph 1 to body paragraph 2. And that's going to be a linking sentence. And the linking sentence is done in such a way. So typically I make like this bold, and the stuff where I have to insert things later, I just leave. So I'm going to make this bold, right? The stuff where I have to insert stuff, I just have a colon to remind me I need to write something after it eventually. And then there's a linking sentence. Okay. Now, what does the linking sentence do? It makes the topic sentence of body paragraph 2, the topic sentence of body paragraph 2, it makes it seem like it didn't just come out of nowhere, right? Hence the term link. It seems like you haven't just jumped. Okay, so what it does is whatever the last thing you said in body paragraph 1 is, it kind of relates the topic sentence to the next topic sentence, or the last thing you said in body part. It doesn't have to be the topic sentence, but it can be. It's like the last thing you said in this paragraph. So here, and then includes something that the topic sentence raises. So that's vague. So maybe if you imagine that here, this like purple dot is just some phrase or part of the last sentence, and this blue dot is something in the topic sentence, then your linking sentence is going to have a bit of purple and a bit of blue, but not all of the purple and blue, because then you're repeating yourself. Does that make sense? It's a bit weird to do it with the colors like that, but if it doesn't, or you have a question about it, write it in the chat or use your mic. If you're comfortable using your mic, just know that this video is going on YouTube for all the other students. Yeah, so that's how a linking sentence works. Right? So we're just building a template now to keep us on track. Right? So body paragraph 2 is going to have a topic sentence. Then it's going to have evidence. And then it's going to have its own linking sentence. Now, in a 1,000-word essay, well, in every essay, you should consider one objection. I mean, in a massive essay like a thesis, you're going to consider heaps, right? Or if you were writing a book, you might have a whole chapter dedicated to objections. But in a 1,000-word essay, you're going to just have like one paragraph dedicated to an objection to your argument. So typically here, I'll write body paragraph 3, or I'll write objection paragraph. All right. And it's going to have a topic sentence. And I realized I didn't define topic sentence, so I will in a sec. And it's going to have evidence and a linking sentence. But this linking sentence in the final paragraph is a special one. The reason it's a special one, it's not all that special, but it's just something you have to keep in mind. Right? And remember, we're including the word counts. So like, next to our paragraphs and our intros and our conclusion. So this is going to be like roughly 300 words, 255 words or something. I'm just going to write 300 words, right? So now we have a template to keep us on track, right? Okay, so this linking sentence, notice the difference with all of the other linking sentences is that they're linking to another paragraph. Well, so is this last linking sentence. It's linking to another paragraph, but it's not just any paragraph, okay? It's the conclusion. So this linking sentence that I'm highlighting now with the cursor is not linking to more sub-argument. It's not linking to another argumentation paragraph. It's linking to your conclusion. We're going to wrap things up. And that's 100 words. And here, you should restate, whoops, restate thesis statement. And it's not like, you know, in exactly the same words, because you've fleshed things out a bit in the body. So there's a bit more detail. So, you know, like the restatement of the thesis statement is going to be very similar, but it's not word for word, because in the body paragraph, you've gone on to argue and clarify things and make things precise, so that, you know, what you have down here, right, is probably not word for what you have up here. All right, it's going to be something that's a little bit more detailed and a little bit more precise, but not all that much different. So restate your thesis statement. You can think of this whole skeleton of an essay or essay template as tell them what you're going to tell them. And now the body, tell them. And then the conclusion, tell them what you told them. But if there's one caveat I'll add to that, it's that you're not just telling people stuff, you're arguing. So in other words, this is tell them what you're going to argue. And then the whole body is tell them what you argued. And then the conclusion, sorry, the intro is tell them what you're going to argue. The body is just argue. And then the conclusion is tell them what you argued. Okay. So what do we got? 300, 300, 300, that's 900. Plus 100 will give you 1,000. And then plus that 100 would give you 1,100. So you'd be like right on 1,100 words, because it's a 1,000 word essay. And you're allowed that 10% margin either side without penalty. So in other words, the interval of all natural numbers, you know, from 900 to 1,100, that interval, you can have like that, any of those values in that interval can be your word count. Obviously you don't want to have smack bang on 1,100. You know, you're running the gauntlet a bit there. So yeah, one of these paragraphs, if you can make them just slightly less than 300 words, let's say if you make the objection one or the second body paragraph something like 255 or whatever, then you're like 45 words within the word count. Okay. So yeah, this is a template I typically draw up. Right. And these word count things are just guidelines. So you want roughly 100 for an intro, somewhere around 300 for the body paragraphs, and then the conclusion somewhere around 100. Okay. Now let's go and fill it in. This is the order in which we fill in the template, because it's also the order in which we write the essay. What we absolutely do not do is write the introduction first. Okay. And we do not write the conclusion first. Even though the introduction is the start, that's not where we start writing. The reason for that is that the introduction is where you tell the reader what you will argue. Well, if you haven't written the body yet, the part of the essay where you actually do the bulk of the arguing, you can't tell them what you're going to argue. You can't tell them what you argue because you haven't argued it yet. Okay? And what this does, if you write your thesis statement first, then you end up twisting your argument to align with your thesis statement. The only thing that should influence how you develop your argument is by considering what you think and how well you can justify it, as well as what you don't agree with and how well you can justify your disagreement. Okay? How well you can justify an attack or a defense of some view. Okay? That's the only kind of stuff that should influence your argument. It absolutely should not be anything like, oh, I've already written in my introduction this thesis statement, so I need to stay on track and make sure that my argument conforms to that thesis statement. Nonsense. Don't do that. So now, topic sentence, I realized I may have forgotten to explain what that is, but it's first helpful to understand that you can think of each body paragraph as a miniature essay. Okay, so you can think of topic sentence as introduction, or more precisely, thesis statement. So a topic sentence is a thesis statement for a body paragraph. The evidence is like the body. So the evidence in a paragraph, which comes in the middle, is like the body of a paragraph. Okay, now the linking sentence, that's like the conclusion of an essay, but it does something slightly more than a conclusion, because a conclusion ends the essay and restates the thesis statement. You restate the thesis statement in the conclusion and you wrap up the essay. All right. Obviously, in a linking sentence, say the linking sentence at the end of body paragraph 1, you can't wrap up the essay there because the essay ain't done. All right. Body paragraph 2 comes after that. So you have to wrap up body paragraph 1 here, but somehow link it to the topic sentence of body paragraph 2 so that it flows. Okay. It doesn't feel like topic sentence 2 is just a rabbit that gets pulled out of a hat, like from nowhere and unexpected, and, you know, surprises the reader. Okay. All right. So you can think of that, you know, a topic sentence as like a thesis statement for the paragraph. The evidence is like the body of the paragraph, where you provide the reasons why you hold the topic sentence, why you believe whatever statement that happens to be. And then the linking sentence as a conclusion, with the extra fact that it has to link to the topic sentence of the following body paragraph. So I'm just going to pause there for a sec to make sure everyone's following me. Like, does that make sense to everyone? Xandro, welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right. Thanks, Mary, Angela, and Lisa for the thumbs up. And Xandro, I'm not sure at which point you joined us, but this is going on YouTube. So anything you missed, you'll be able to view later. And just email me if you're not on like the distribution list for these Zoom meetings. Tomorrow will be like the last one. And tomorrow is just an extra one to help students. I'm going to write like a whole 1,000 word essay and walk everyone through like the process that I go through. But this is part of it. This is part of the process. This is like the second thing I do. Like after all of my reading and research and note taking is done, this is like the second thing I do, is make this this template. Okay. Then I go through and I don't like do this all in one session. Okay. I have to go away and apply the dot that has 0 mass up here in my case. I have to go away and I have to think. All right. I have to decide how I feel about certain views and what arguments I think I can defend and what arguments I think I can attack and what my reasons are and that kind of thing. And there's no algorithmic way for doing that, but that's kind of what makes it fun, is because it's really about you. I'm going to come back after some thought. Maybe I paced around for like 2 minutes because I was pretty confident about what I wanted to argue. Maybe I thought about it for an hour. Okay. But suppose I've come back and I've kind of got a sense of my overall argument, but I'm not sure, you know. I'm going to try and make a topic sentence. And my topic sentence, I'm just like making stuff up. So like I don't think that I believe what I'm putting here or that this is what I would argue if I wrote this. It's just an example. I'm going to say something very simple. I'm going to not try to jazz it up. I'm not going to try and sound smart and verbose and highfalutin and pretentious. I'm going to say, you know, inductivism is an irrational scientific method. All right. And I'm going to leave it open to the chat, like to see if people want to suggest maybe a simpler way of saying this, one that's more succinct or something like that. But understand that we can't completely drop formality. So I can't say inductivism stupid. All right. Okay. So, you know, that would be a simpler way of communicating that topic sentence, and it would capture the meaning, but you know, to some degree. But obviously I can't write that in an essay. It's almost like not taking the essay topic seriously. All right. But the thing is, the only reason I would think this in the first place, this topic sentence, I'll actually just pause here and look at the chat to see if anyone's got any questions. All right, cool. I'll go back to sharing the screen. Okay, but how did I get to this topic sentence? Well, I went away and I thought about it. But when I was thinking, what kind of things were I considering in my head? The kind of stuff that goes here, the evidence. That's what was helping me come to a thesis, a topic sentence for this body paragraph. So, what goes here? Maybe I have lots of pieces of evidence. Maybe I have just one piece of evidence. And in this case, let's say I have one piece of evidence. Hume's problem of induction. Right? Okay. Then I leave the linking sentence. Right? Because that's more to do with just making sure the language flows well, and that kind of thing. It's not so much to do with crafting the argument. Okay. Now I'm up to body paragraph 2. Okay. I need a topic sentence. I go away and I think, and the further down you go, the easier this gets. So it's going to be hardest to come up with the first topic sentence. All right, because that's when you're the least sure of what you think. But notice that once you realize what you think about something, that can help determine, or sometimes can help you arrive at a view of what you think about something else. And if for topic 1, I realize that in my first body paragraph, like essay question 1, that I'm going to attack inductivism as a scientific method, and my reasons for claiming it's irrational is Hume's problem of induction. Well, now there's only one other method to talk about, and that's falsificationism, Popper's method. I've already said my 2 cents on inductivism. Okay. So in this paragraph, I'm not going to be attacking it so much, right? Because I would be repeating myself and wasting words. I only have 800 words to argue with, because 100 is getting stolen by the pesky intro and 100 is getting stolen by the thieving conclusion, right? So I'm going to arrive at the topic sentence, and I know that this one's got to be about the other method, because one paragraph develops one point. Okay, there's one topic devoted to each paragraph. There's like a one-to-one correspondence. For the mathematically inclined, there's a bijective function between the set of all paragraphs and the set of all topics raised in your essay. If your essay has 3 body paragraphs, then there's 3 main topics in your essay, and vice versa. Okay, so topic sentence. I know this is going to be about falsificationism and Popper, and I have to decide whether I think it's also irrational and therefore they're both cruddy, or whether I think it's got more going for it than inductivism. And let's suppose I end up thinking that Popper's method's got more going for it than inductivism. My topic sentence can be something as simple and succinct as, falsificationism is a better alternative to inductivism. I'm going to do something here deliberately as a scientific method. Okay? And this is what I'm talking about deliberately. I'm deliberately doing something worse than I could have done it. All right? So you might look at this and you might think, there's not too much to, criticize about what he's written. But I'm putting an emphasis on being succinct. Okay? And I don't deliberately try to write succinctly straight up. I don't try to write I don't try to avoid being succinct, but I'm not super strict when I write my first draft. This isn't a draft, by the way, this is a template. So I'm not super strict about writing very well and all that kind of stuff. I write a garbage first draft and then I polish it into a second draft, which is a bit better. Then I polish the second into a third, which is even better, until I run out of time and can't do any more drafts, or until I'm just happy with it and I'm like, I'm happy with this. I'm going to submit it so that it's out of my mind. Okay. But let's suppose I put this in the template, then this topic sentence ended up going into the essay, and now I'm like polishing up and, improving it with each draft. Well, I might come back here and I might realize that falsificationism and inductivism, what kind of things are they? What are those two things? They're a what? They're a kind of what? And someone answer in the chat, please, if you could be so kind. They're very different than each other, but they're the same kind of thing. Just like a horse and a camel are very different from each other, but they're both an animal. Close, close. So your answer is close, but not quite. So remember, laws, what help us? Laws are just these natural phenomena that occur regularly. So they're like general regularities in nature. And theories are the things that help us explain the laws. So this is actually, I'm glad you raised this, because this is a common thing that can detract from student essays, where they talk about Popper's theory, or like the inductivist theory. In another context, in a philosophy essay that wasn't a philosophy of science essay, it might be okay to like call views theories and stuff. You might talk about Aristotle's theory. Yeah. So Mary, they're methods. Yeah. So in everyday speak, it would be fine to refer to someone's view as a theory, right? But because we're doing philosophy of science, and the word theory we want to reserve for actual theories in science, like Einstein's theory of relativity, quantum theory, Newton's theory, that kind of thing, Fresnel's theory of light, Maxwell's theories of electromagnetism. Yeah, we don't want to use the word theory to refer to things that are actually methods, because theories in science explain laws, and methods aren't explanations. They're things we do. Does that make sense? Great. Excellent. I'm glad that you said that. And this is going to bring me to an important point. Just for, like studying in general, and learning in general. I didn't plan to bring this up, but you get way more value out of the attempts to answer questions in class than the ones that you get wrong than the ones you get right. The ones you get right, you didn't gain anything because you knew the answer and you got a pat on the head and it stroked your ego and your self-esteem and it makes you feel good about yourself. There's nothing wrong with getting questions right. Like, kudos if you answer questions in class and you get them right. But you actually want to, like, the times to take advantage of the times when you answer a question, you get it wrong. Those are the ones that have the best learning opportunity. Okay. Imagine like we're a room full of boxers. You know, like we're all amateur boxers or professional boxers or whatever, like the boxing sport, all of us. Okay. Whoever the best one is in the room, the best boxer, is probably also the one who has been punched in the jaw the most amount of times in a boxing match. So we are all like philosophers in a sense, right? All of us, okay? Like all of you in this Zoom meeting and myself. Out of all of you, I'm the one who has gotten the most answers wrong in class, where a lecturer has asked a question and I've tried to answer it and they've corrected my answer, right? Because my answer wasn't on the mark. Okay. So never feel down. You should feel happy when you get something wrong. Yeah, because I've done it more than any of you and it just benefits me. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. I was sharing Word. I believe I was sharing Word. We're in the template. Okay. Now my point here was that because falsificationism is by definition a method, and because inductivism is by definition a method, they're both defined as these kinds of scientific methods. This stuff is redundant that I'm highlighting here. Adds no value. It really says nothing. You don't have to say falsificationism as a scientific method because there's no such thing as falsificationism as anything else. Falsificationism is a scientific method. It's never not a scientific method. Okay. Same as inductivism. Okay. It's a bit like saying, if I left that part there, that would be like saying this. The summit is at the top of the mountain. Well, summit just means top of the mountain. So this is equal to saying the summit, say it this way, because it's more obvious, the top of the mountain is at the top of the mountain. Okay? Or like the bachelor is unmarried. That's like saying the bachelor is a bachelor, because bachelor means unmarried. Okay, so when you proofread, scrutinize, edit your essay, you look for like redundant stuff like that, among other things. So how did I arrive at this topic sentence? When I went away and thought about it and I paced around in my backyard and smoked a cigar, how did I end up arriving at this topic sentence? Well, I must have had some evidence in my head. Otherwise, it's a dogmatic, arbitrary, unjustified belief. So if I arrived at it and I'm careful not to think illogically or dogmatically, I must have had some evidence in my head. And the evidence might be that falsificationism sorry, it's been a long day, does not rely on induction and instead aims to deductively falsify hypotheses. Okay, so you might not want to write like a full sentence because you just want to have like bullet points of evidence. So let's do that, something like this. Okay, because it's just a template. It's very easy when you're doing the template to actually, sometimes you find yourself writing the essay and you didn't mean to, you just meant to be writing a template. But hey, like maybe that's not such a bad thing anyways, but it's good to get organized first anyways. So evidence, you might say, does not rely on induction. Okay. Then you might say another point of evidence is solely relies on deduction. Or let's say only. You couldn't find a good replacement. And aims at falsification rather than proof, or aims to falsify rather than prove hypotheses. Cool. And that's like 3 points of evidence. Notice that up here, I only had 1 point of evidence. Okay. This might take a while to explain, and these things are kind of straightforward. Aims to deductively falsify, or, you know, to keep it short, you might leave it. You might say aims to deductively falsify rather than inductively prove hypotheses. Maybe you're confident you'll remember that and you don't want to put it in there. Anyways, then the linking sentence, you leave it because that's just like languagey stuff, right? That's just trying to make the paragraphs flow from one to another. Now I'm on to my third paragraph, body paragraph 3, and that's the objection paragraph. And you should always raise an objection in an essay. In this essay, I advise you to pick one objection and only one. You don't have the room to consider more than one objection, and considering more than one objection in an essay of this size is redundant, even if you could do it in the word count anyway. I'll tell you why. So first, I might flesh it out. I might do this part of the template, and then I'll explain why. So topic sentence. So, you know, objection. Popper's method, or actually for bloody consistency, I'll say falsificationism. Falsificationism you might say does not avoid the use of induction, and then realize you can instead be simpler. Now, the evidence here is not evidence for the objection. Okay? You will raise this objection, right? And you'll also give reason why someone might think this. So it's like you're giving a bit of evidence for it. You're basically just telling the reader why it's an objection that some people might think it makes sense to raise. Okay? But the evidence here, this evidence is not evidence for the objection. That is evidence for why you can dismiss this objection. So the topic sentence where I have objection, that's really unfinished, because what you're going to do is dismiss the objection. And if you feel like you can't logically do it and do it in a convincing or compelling way, well, that means that's an indicator that you don't have good enough grounds for believing, you know, the topic sentence in body paragraph 1 and the topic sentence in body paragraph 2. Or more specifically, the body paragraph the topic sentence of body paragraph 2. Because why do you believe the topic sentence in body paragraph 2? Well, because it does not rely on induction and only relies on deduction, right? Those were your grounds for believing and being willing to argue what I've highlighted here, that topic sentence. But if you end up realizing that this objection seems pretty strong and you can't dismiss it, well, you need to go back and you need to start here, right? And maybe you would change this and you'd say something like falsification is irrational as well, or something like that. Maybe you'd say something like, you know, falsificationism is, or you might not even, you might leave this and you know, because you might feel that you can dismiss this objection, so you might leave it. But if you can't dismiss the objection, something's got to change up here. Does that make sense? I'm just gonna like open up the console properly so I can see everyone. Okay, so can people give me a thumbs up to say I've seen yours, Mary? But if you were yep, Angela, great. Welcome, Angela. Xandro, welcome. And Lisa, welcome. There's like another Lisa. Okay. All right, thank you. And if you joined us part of the way through, this is going up on YouTube. You'll get to see it. Okay. So I'm just gonna finish this template and then I'll go for a break. And I'll yeah, I'll finish this part of the template and then we can go for a 5 or 10 minute break, and then I'll explain why you only consider one objection. It's not just word count, and why it's so important to dismiss the objection, and how to pick an objection, because you might do research and there'll be a bunch of objections out there. Oh yeah, same Lisa, just on the phone. Cool. And yeah, you might think, well, which objection do I pick? And the answer might be counterintuitive. Okay, so I'll go back to sharing Word. Yeah, so you might say falsificationism uses induction. And now this part is like the response. So it's kind of like part of the topic sentence as well. And you say, however, this is mistaken. See, it's simple. Don't overthink it, right? Evidence might be that that, you know, well, first let's understand why someone might raise the objection. You know, I've gone away and I thought someone might raise this objection. Why do I think someone would raise that? Well, because there's some evidence for it, but it's evidence that I don't find convincing. So evidence for like the objection. Inability to falsify a hypothesis as grounds for believing it. And this is like terrible language. This would have to get fixed, right? I'd have to go back and fix this later, but inability to falsify a hypothesis as grounds for believing it seems like inductive reasoning. And then, you know, you could go back through that and you could say, oh, well, I could have just said induction, you know, like rather than inductive reasoning. Maybe I could have said, you know, is an example of induction. But you know how you like, I think you're all familiar with what inductive inferences are now. this objection is a real one in the literature, and it was raised, and Popper did respond to it. And his response was clever, I think. But just so you know, so I'm like getting a bit off the essay template now to explain this objection because it's a common one that students like to write about. This thing here, you know, I think in the lecture, the way it's described is that, you know, failure to, or, you know, like, is the fact that we haven't been able to falsify a hypothesis a good reason to believe it, you know? And the rub there, the reason why that gets brought up is that if you believe the hypothesis based on the ground that it hasn't been falsified in the past, that's inductive reasoning. So it seems like induction is creeping in the back door. If you think that the sun will rise tomorrow on the basis that every day in the past you've observed it rise in the morning, you know, metaphorically speaking, it doesn't actually rise. That's inductive reasoning. So, you know, if you believe that the hypothesis is true and, you know, it's going to be true next week and it's not going to get falsified tomorrow because every time we've tried to falsify it in the past, it hasn't been falsified, then you have like inductive grounds for believing the hypothesis. And that's probably correct, right? But the thing is, Popper's response is along the lines of saying, well, yeah, you would have inductive grounds for believing it if that's why you believed it, but that's not what we do. We don't place belief in the hypothesis. We just treat it as the like, you know, the best hypothesis available and the one that's currently undergoing testing. In other words, it's not like it's a mission to falsify a hypothesis and then eventually accept it because we've failed to falsify it. There's never acceptance. Acceptance is never part of the plan. We are only ever trying to falsify things, and the current one we have is not necessarily the one we believe. It's just the one we're trying to falsify. That's kind of like Popper's response in a nutshell. Okay. And then you can say dismissal. So this is part of your evidence. So what I'll do is I'll put all this to the left, and to be consistent, I'll make this all bullet point. All right. When I do this, I number it all. So I know like how many pieces of evidence I have for this paragraph. And I know how many pieces I have for the first paragraph, how many pieces of evidence I have for the first paragraph. And more is not always better. Okay. Dismissal. Now, this is the evidence for your dismissal, or my dismissal. I might say, you know, we do not believe the hypothesis on the grounds that it hasn't been falsified. We just treat it as the best currently available. All right, something simple. I might go back later and make this clearer as my thinking becomes clearer. I might not like something, I might not change it, but the important thing is that overall, I've now got a template, right? For my whole body. So I've now got like this template for 800 words. The linking sentences will fill themselves in, okay? So I'm just going to pause here, but I won't stop sharing the screen for a while because I want everyone to be able to see it. But you see how that's the skeleton? That's the structure of an essay, right? And now each body paragraph has like a mini essay structure within it because the topic sentence of a body paragraph is kind of like the thesis statement of the entire essay, and the evidence for each body paragraph is kind of like the body of the whole essay, and the linking sentence of each paragraph is kind of like the conclusion of the whole essay. They're just at a micro level, right? The thesis statement's at the macro level, the conclusion where you restate the thesis statements at the macro level. The topic sentence is at like the micro level, and so is the evidence and a linking sentence, all right? Bearing in mind that a linking sentence has two jobs, not just to wrap up the paragraph, but to link to the following paragraph, whereas the conclusion only is like has one job. It's got to wrap it up. Well, I mean, you can say two jobs, restate the thesis statement. So it's got two jobs too. But the linking sentence doesn't have to restate the topic sentence. Okay. So I'm just going to open up the chat. All right. So I'm leaving that there so people can see it, but does that make sense to people? Give me a sec so I can actually I'll just stop sharing it now because you'll be able to pause it in the YouTube video so I can actually like see all your, like I can see the console properly. Okay, now I can see the console properly. Yeah, does that all make sense to people? Do anyone have questions about that template? I mean, we're not done. We're going to go back we're going to do the introduction part and we're going to do the conclusion part, but they kind of take care of themselves. They actually they're a function of what we've already done. They fall out of what we've already done. It's kind of a little bit robotic. You kind of just follow, like the Mamma Mia sing along, and there's a little Mickey Mouse head at the bottom that bounces along the words when you're meant to sing them. Yeah, the introduction and the conclusion are a matter of like following the bouncing Mickey Mouse head ball. So yeah, how do people feel about that? Do people feel like if they did that, it would keep them on track, help them stick to structure, break the task down into little manageable bits? Any like comments or feedback would be great. Your analogies are awesome. I'm assuming that's to do with the Mickey Mouse head bouncing ball, right? That just came to mind because I had a beer earlier today and I haven't had one in like months. And the brand of beer we were drinking was one that when I was like 18, whatever age I was when the Mamma Mia sing along came out in cinemas, my friend bought like a case of that beer and we like slammed it down. We went to Mamma Mia sing along. It was like one of our birthdays. I don't remember, but yeah, it was hilarious. We were being really stupid. Yeah, that's why that analogy came to me just before, because I hadn't had that brand of beer since all those years ago. So, all right, Angela asks, how would you incorporate your personal opinion? Would you just add interlace it in each bloody paragraph? Yep, but you see the template that I've done up, that's all stuff that I'm arguing. You see? So yeah, that's so it all is my own opinion. Not really, it's just an example. But like let's suppose that I was doing the Psalm 1000 essay and I was one of the students. That's me arguing. So it's all my own opinion. It's all my argument. It will be supported by other people's arguments. Like it might be supported by something Popper said in like the evidence parts, and I'll have to cite him here in the evidence or whatever. Maybe there's, if I was doing topic 2, there's like a kun part, and I'll have to cite kun in the evidence, but they're supporting my argument. I'm the one, whatever evidence I cite, and for you, most of you, it's all going to just be the lecture content workbook. They're supporting your argument. You're the one doing the arguing. The whole thing is where I'm coming into it with my view. Does that answer your question, Angela? Oh, yep. I see. Thank you. Cool. So I'm just going to look at it real quick, and I'm going to share it again because this is going to be helpful too. So this is the last thing I'll say before we go for a break. So I'm just going to share the Word doc again. And all right, notice that And I'm going to like put this question to you. I'd like someone to answer. Forget about the intro and conclusion for now. In the topic sentence, I'm saying what I think. And I don't have to reference what I think. And in the linking sentence, I'm not using anyone else's ideas. I'm just making sure that the last sentence of the first paragraph flows in to the topic sentence of the second paragraph. So I shouldn't need to reference in a topic sentence, and I shouldn't need to reference, in a linking sentence, right? And given that the body paragraph is made up out of three components, a topic sentence, the evidence, and the linking sentence, where should all my referencing and citations be? So I'm just going to look at the chat. Referencing and citations in this template that I've made, where would they kind of appear? So Angela says evidence, Lisa says evidence, and Xandra says evidence. Like everyone's on the money. Yep. Why would I reference a topic sentence? Topic sentence is where I'm telling you what I'm about to argue. Okay. So no need to cite there. Now, a topic sentence will typically be, like most of the time, the very first sentence of the paragraph, but not always. Like you'll find from experience that sometimes it just doesn't fit with the language. It doesn't sound very good. And it might be the second sentence, right? But yeah, it's got to be the first or second sentence. The third sentence is you've left it too late. Why? Because if you haven't gotten to your topic sentence in that paragraph by the third sentence, you are waffling. That's one way to tell that you are waffling, not being succinct, and not getting to the point, including, you are including like redundant stuff. Okay, that's one way to tell. There's many indicators, many ways to tell, but that's one way to tell. Is you look at your topic sentences, are they all mostly the first sentence of the paragraph, and at the very worst, the second sentence. Okay, so I'm going to just I'm going to leave it because I said that was the last thing I'd say before a break. But can people remind me, in case I lose my train of thought when I come back, that what I was talking about was to do with evidence and referencing? Okay. Great. You're all legends. So it's 12:36. Let's come back in like roughly 10 minutes. Doesn't have to be on the dot. Okay. And yeah, we'll kick on. All right. Okay, so I'm back, and I still in the break, I think. But yeah, what was it, like 12:36 when I left? Yep. Yeah, cool. All right, so I'm just going to wait for a thumbs up from people until I know that everyone's back before I continue. Thank you, Angela. So I'm just wait for Mary and Zandra. Thank you, Mary. And coffee is out of arm's reach. Shaved this morning so I don't look like I'm old. Or, you know, I look a little bit younger, I hope. Alrighty, Zandra, you with us, buddy? It's all right, there's no rush. You know what? You're probably right, Mary, that it's the coffee, not the age. Yeah, it's probably what it is. Maybe like more water, less coffee. Does coffee actually do that? Does coffee actually make you look older? Yeah, all good. No worries. No problem whatsoever, Zandra. I think that the Netflix series I'm watching, I'm gonna watch some Netflix when I'm done here. I think there's only like 2 episodes or something before the season ends, and I think they've only made one season. I hope there's a second season. But I looked in my pantry, and I've got more popcorn than can last for 2 episodes. So I might need to start a new series, and I don't know what I'm going to start. But I'll think of something because I have to eat all that popcorn. And why? Well, it's just better than not eating all of that popcorn. So let's move on. Okay. And there was something I was thinking about that was to do with evidence and referencing. Yeah, okay, I remember. So I made the point that given how this is how we might structure an essay, well, it would make sense that all of your referencing would go in the middle of the paragraphs because it would go in the evidence section because there's no there's no need to reference in a topic sentence or in a linking sentence. Well, this is how you keep track of your referencing and where stuff came from. What you do is you have another document running. I mean, you don't have to do this. It's just something I do. Now, what I've done is I've hit Control N to open a new document. And can people tell me, someone just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether they can see the new document? Because I'm not sure if it will just keep sharing the original one or the new one. So can you see the template document for the essay? Or can you see this new blank page? Just gonna check the chat. Okay, that just means I'm gonna have to share and unshare between them. No worries. Okay, so this document 2 is what I have open. And let's say I have the, so what this document is for is my sources. So it's how I keep track of my sources. So I just make this document and I say source 1, and I will say, for example, Sci 1000 lecture notes. And for many of you, this is all that you'll be using. So you might not need to make this document. And source 2 will be, let's say, the logic of scientific discovery. So I put the author. And then let's say source 3 was an inquiry concerning human, lovely spelling, understanding. That's the book where the problem of induction gets raised. So that problem of induction comes from David Hume. Concerning human understanding, Hume. Okay, let's say I did this extra research, right? And I was using these 3 sources. Okay. Well, then I put here in the evidence stuff like this. Does not rely on induction. Well, maybe I learned that in Popper's book, source 2, right? And maybe I learned this from Popper's book and this from Popper's book because it's all about falsificationism. In body paragraph, oh, sorry, I just realized I gotta share between. So I'll backspace all that stuff. I was doing that in the templates. I'm gonna unshare the sources document and go back to the essay template. If I start like doing something else and it looks like it's meant to be in another screen, then just let me know. So now I'll go back to sharing the essay template, and what I do is I look at my evidence and I go, in the first paragraph, I've got this piece of evidence. Where did that come from? Well, I learned about Hume's problem of induction in Hume's book, which is in my sources document, and that is source 3. Okay. Now, that's all the evidence for that paragraph. So I move on to paragraph 2, and I realize my first piece of evidence is that falsificationism doesn't rely on induction. Well, I learned that from Popper's book, The Logic of Scientific Discovery, and that's source 2. And, I'll put something like this. Page, whatever. Source 2, page, whatever. And why do I like give it, why do I talk about, source 3 and source 2? Why do I not just say like, instead of source 3, I say Hume and page whatever, and in source 2, I say Popper and then page whatever? Well, sometimes I'll be writing a bigger essay, like several thousand words, and maybe I'm like referencing several books by the same author and then papers by them as well. So I might be like reading like Popper's book and then like some other papers that he wrote. So, just saying Popper doesn't tell me which source it came from. It just tells me the author. Okay. So that's why I give them like numbers. Okay. Because I might have source 4 and that's something else Popper wrote, and source 5, that's something else Hume wrote. Okay. Maybe a journal article, like Hume's before the time of journal articles, but maybe another book. And let's say evidence 2 in body paragraph 2, Well, I learned that in Popper's book too. And it would make sense. It doesn't have to be this way, but it would probably be the case that everything I know about what Popper thinks, I learned from stuff that Popper wrote. Okay, so all of these might be source 2, which was Popper's book. And Hume's problem of induction, I learned from something that Hume wrote. So it would make sense that would be Hume's book. So these are just examples, but maybe, maybe for here, that in like body paragraph 2 for you, that's the Sci 1000 lecture notes, which is like source 1. And, Hume's problem of induction would be source 1, the lecture notes as well. Now I get to the objection paragraph, and I see that the objection, well, maybe I heard about this objection and it's discussed in the lecture notes. So I'm going to go source 1. And I'm going to go page, whatever page it's on, number or numeral, whatever. Okay. And then for 2, well, maybe I learned this in Popper's book, because Popper maybe preempts the objection and offers a response to it before people actually made it. And then even the response, even though he preempted the objection and responded to it, people still went ahead and made it anyways. Hint, hint, maybe that happened. Yeah, and yeah. Okay, so in addition to that, the sources document that I made is kind of useless unless in my note taking I've done something like this too. So I'm going to do some changing of screen sharing, and I'll start another Word doc. Unless I've done something like this, it doesn't have to be this way, but this is just how I do it to keep things organized. Unless I've done something like this, source 1, and I say that it's the Sci 1000 lecture notes, pages, this is where I read from, Sci 1000 lecture notes, page X to Y, right? Unless I've done something like this, and then, and the thing is, like, when I'm writing this down, you sure whether you're going to use it. I'm just taking notes from the source as I read it, and I'm stuff in there that I think. So maybe you read it as you go. Read it, highlight stuff, and then like write in here what you highlight. So this is where you're collecting your notes, and rather than evidence, I'll actually call this something I read that I think might be useful, right? And then I'm gonna like use quotation marks to indicate that I've written that again. Like that's something I've read that might be useful. So if this is equal to A, like say that whatever that is A, well, this would be B, and this would be C. So, but what I'm doing here is when I read it in the notes or whatever source it is, like Popper's book or whatever, if you're doing extra research, what I do is I put it into my own words, because this is how you ensure that you don't commit plagiarism, other than referencing stuff that isn't your own. So if any of this gets included, any of this in these notes gets included, it has to be referenced, but referencing is not enough to avoid plagiarism. You have to also use your own words. Okay, you can't just say verbatim what's in the lecture notes and throw that into your essay without using quotation marks and referencing the quote. and you shouldn't just quote stuff unless you're going to engage in it. Otherwise, you're just using a quote to do the arguing for you. What I do is I make sure it's in my own words. So I'm creating these layers of it being changed. And this is the first layer of change. And these are like layers of security to ensure that I do not commit plagiarism. But what I also do here, so I'm just going to make this look simpler. Like this is A, right? Where A stands for something I think might be useful. It might, it's something that could potentially be one of those evidence points that you saw in my body paragraphs for the essay template. And this is B, something else. And this is C. And it just keeps going on and on and on like that. What I also do is I say source one. And why do I write source one again? Of course it's source one. It's in the source one document. Well, the thing is, I might open this document and move it into another document, and I won't know that it came from source one. Okay, so I say source one, page, and then whatever page it's on. And if it's a bunch of information that's explained over several pages, I'll say, well, it's pages such and such to such and such, right? From pages hash to star. Okay, and then B also came from source one, pages such and such to such and such. And like obviously this means that they're all on the same page in the same source, but like hash and star, just imagine them not being fixed and varying. And I've included the page here, right? And the reason I do this is because when I am going off and thinking about my topic sentences for body paragraphs, and then I think of the evidence that led me to believe that topic sentence and be motivated to argue it in that paragraph, I find that evidence in one of these documents. For example, if that evidence came from source one, then I find it in source one and say that evidence was B, right? Then I'm going to like swap the screen sharing back to the essay template. And before I go into the essay template, does everyone understand what I've done so far? Just a thumbs up, thumbs down for yes and no. Yep, yes. Cool. And Xandro, is that clear what I've done? That was just like a document for compiling my notes from one of the sources. Yep, great. Now I'm going to share the template. I'm going back to the template, right? And if we notice here, how does this evidence get put in the first place? Maybe I wrote it in off the top of my head, but something that you might often do is grab the evidence and copy and paste it into your template. So let's say I had a third piece of evidence here that came from the course notes. Bam, there it is. Okay. And I've got these three pieces of evidence, and they've come from those different Word documents that have all of the notes I've taken from those sources in them. So I'm going to go back to sharing the previous document. So because it's a hassle to like swap between sharing and stuff, typically I have these in separate documents, but I'm just going to pretend they're in separate documents. So imagine I've started a new document, and it doesn't have to, like you might want to put them all in one document, but I find it's easier to alt tab between Word docs than be scrolling up and down. And I try to use like every little advantage to save time and make me work quicker and be more efficient. But let's say source 2, well, that was the logic of scientific discovery. So imagine this is a second document. There's a whole new document. It's not in the same document. It's the title of a new document. And I say, you know, maybe it was from a chapter to a chapter that I read, or from page to a page. So I say page, you know, X to Y or whatever. And I do the same thing. So even though it wouldn't be the same stuff, I'm just going to copy and paste it down into here. And I'm just going to change this kind of stuff to like D. Okay, D, E, F. And these aren't source 1, they're source 2. Right? And I need to include the sources here in each individual piece of evidence so that when I copy and paste it and I go to reference it later, so it's been copied and pasted somewhere, I go to reference it later, I'm you know, I don't look at a piece of evidence and be like, oh gosh, what source did that come from? Okay. If you're only going off the lecture notes, you won't have that problem. You'll know they all came from the same source. But then I'll go and create a third Word document. So this is a completely new one. If I've used like 3 sources of information, the third Word document would be an inquiry concerning human understanding. I should insert the author here. Popper. Human understanding. And here the author would be Hume. And I just use last names. Okay. Page. And I read from page X to page Y. So I know for like all of these pieces of evidence, you know, if I forget a page number or something, I forget to write it in, like this is G, H, I. Let's say like I forgot to write this page in like that. Well, I realize it's from source 2, because you'll make all these kind of little mistakes and you'll have to go back and fix them. You know, I know it's from source 2, so then I look at source 2 and I know that when I was reading, sorry, this is source 3, so I should change all these. And I know that it's from source 3. So I know that evidence G is from source 3. So I go and I read the title and I realize that, oh, when I was reading Hume's inquiry, I read from page 23 to 37. So now when I go and scan the book and I skim through it, I know where to skim, where to start skimming from, and where to finish. And if I get to page Y, I know I've gone too far. So I don't waste more time than I need to, right? So source 2, sorry, source 3. And now I can come back and realize what page it was on and put it in. So I have all this redundancy built in for if when I forget to include something, or, you know, forget where I read something. This process is designed so that I can forget everything. Okay. I don't want to forget anything, right? But I could, in my somewhere along my process, forget everything except what my view is. I could forget everything in the tracking of notes and citations and what's evidence for what and what I plan to put where, but it's all captured in case I forget. It's all recorded somehow. Okay. So that's what I do. And I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to sharing the second document I made. Right. And this here is just a standalone document. Just in case anything happens to one of the notes documents, like you lose it, the file gets corrupted or whatever, you can come back here and you can see like what all of your sources are. And because, you know, I know that like it's obvious that you're not going to forget that these were your 3 sources, but maybe in the future when you're writing something really big, you know, like you might have heaps of sources and you'll forget that you read one paper. You know, let's say we get all the way down here and we're up to like source you know, this won't be an issue for you, but say we're up to source 27, and then we get all the way up to here, and we're up to like source 51. You know, with this many sources, like you're probably writing a small book or something, and you might forget that there was just one thing in source 21 that you read that was very important, and you were able to use some evidence in there to support a great topic sentence, and you were really excited about it, and you end up forgetting that you read that source, and you know, your little mini book is all the worse off for it, not as good as it could have been. Okay, so that's why I have this thing. That's why this thing exists. Okay, because I want to remember, I want to have a way. Who knows what could go wrong? Other problems that I can't imagine might happen. Okay, and yeah, I just not want a way of having some kind of redundancy of knowing what my sources are, and how many pages I read. So even in here, I will include the pages. So I'll go page, hash hash to star star, you know, like that. And so all this redundancy is built in for, I mean, like, let's see how another way how this is advantageous. Let's suppose I forgot to add it in. I'm going to change screens. Let's suppose, because like everyone makes these kind of mistakes. I've done it before. Let's suppose that when I was reading Hume's Inquiry, I was like really tired because, you know, I was trying to do all my research, and one day it was getting late, and I was like, oh, if I keep pushing on, I'll have read the last, you know, I'll have 3 sources, and that'll be pretty good. Maybe that's enough for my essay. And because I wasn't focused and I was sleepy, I realized I recorded all of this evidence and I never put the page numbers in. Okay. Well, now what I can do is I can open up this bad boy here, and he comes to the rescue. All right. And I can see, oh, everything that I read from Hume was from page hash hash to page star star. And now it's going to be quicker to find everything. And I can just skim it real quick and look for keywords. And once I find all the stuff, then I can go back. Sorry. Wrong screen. Is it this one or was it this one? It was this one. I can go back and once I've found them, insert them all and protect myself against plagiarism. Cool. Okay, so I have an individual Word doc for each source with all the notes in it. So that'll be one source, one document. This will be a second document for my second source, all the page numbers in it, all of the evidence in it that I think might be useful. Each evidence point will have the page numbers next to them, just as the title of the source will have the page number next to it. Source 3 will be a third Word document, page numbers in the title, page numbers in each individual piece of evidence, okay? As well as what I call the master source list. It's a document that has my all my sources in it. Now, you might not want to do it exactly this way. You might have like, you know, some software or something that takes care of one of these issues, but the main thing is that the issues I've raised, you have some way of taking care of it where it's all redundancy that exists somewhere outside of your memory, so that if you mess something up, you have like a repository of resources which you can draw upon to fix it. Okay. And if you have stuff go wrong at the last minute and there's like 10 minutes to submit, you don't want to be like frantically trying to find where that reference was. You know, it's just alt tab between a bunch of docs and you can find it somewhere else. And you won't have to pick up the book and skim through where it was, because if one document doesn't have it, chances are like some other one does. And Okay. So there's a lot of redundancy built into this for things going wrong. Always have like redundancy plans. If you plan something, you need a plan for, the obvious ways in which that plan can fail. You need a redundancy plan. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing before I go on to intro and conclusion type stuff. And that's going to unfold pretty quickly because it more or less takes care of itself. But before that, I'm just going to pause to ask if anyone has any questions. So I'll wait like for, like somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute. Just catch my breath, make myself look a little older with some caffeine. And I'll also put a question to you. Is that helpful? Do you think that helps with the research process and the building of the essay template? Because really, essay writing the essay is kind of just fleshing out that template. Very. That's good. You like the template, Zandra? Yep, good. I'm glad you like it. It serves me pretty well. 100% agree. That's one of the reasons it's one of the reasons I do it. So you guys are probably way better at this kind of thing than me, but like having files update and store in the cloud and that kind of thing. I'm not great with tech, but I do use OneDrive. So I'm bad with tech that I don't even have a smartphone, like mainly because I like sort of to keep to myself and not be contacted. But I'm totally happy for students to contact me. But yeah, like I like to like sort of keep to myself and stuff. And as a consequence of that, I'm not great with tech. So I'm not all up to speed on what the latest apps are and stuff like that. And yeah, but I do know what cloud computing is and cloud storage. And I use OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive. I think Google Drive is Google's version of cloud computing. But yeah, for an essay I'm working on, I'll have it saved like on my device or whatever, and I'll have it saved on a cloud too, backing up. Yeah, you always want like a redundancy copy of that template that you keep saving as you update it. Autosave in Word is something that is a double-edged sword because you might delete a bunch of stuff and then realize later that you shouldn't have or something like that. So maybe you might want to save multiple versions to avoid that. I actually have autosave on because the reason is I'm kind of happy to risk it because I feel that I'm somewhat experienced at essay writing. So I feel like if something goes wrong, I'll be able to fix it and I'll have given myself enough time to fix it. You all seem like pretty dedicated students just by the fact that you're here. So I imagine like you will like that as well. So yeah, like autosave, all I'm saying is it's something to think about and it's not something that you should just treat as default. Like if your word processor's default setting is autosave, and you go with autosave, or if its default setting is not autosave and you go with that, like you should not just accept whatever the default is. You should make a preference and go with that. So then sort of what you're dealing with and what potential problems can come up. So Andrew says, yeah, I agree. Yeah, cool. Mary, whenever I do a big assessment, I save it to at least 5 different USBs. Yeah, that's smart. That's a lot of redundancy. Yeah, I typically have one saved on my device and then one on OneDrive. And I think OneDrive does its own other kind of backup thing. And then after I submit it, you know, once I've gotten the grade back, I'd like delete it from my device or something just to clear up some space. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? And do people understand what I've done with the essay template thing, the master source document, and the source notes with all the evidence documents as well? So if I can get a thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no, or an answer in the chat, that would be great. That's great, Angela. Thank you. That makes me happy. And Zandro, I'm assuming you so understand what I did because you said you like it, and you know, typically you got to understand it before you can like it. So yeah, yeah, before you can like or dislike it, you got to understand what it is. So guessing you understand what I was doing there. Okay, let's do the intro and the conclusion part. And this is actually going to be quick. It's going to surprise you if you haven't sort of seen this before. I think you underestimate. Makes me look older, but helps me talk. Oh yeah, nothing like coffee at 1:23 a.m. So, yeah, I think many of you will underestimate how much the degree to which the conclusion and the introduction write itself. So, if you manage to flesh out the evidence part of the essay, which you should do, so now if you were up to here in the process, what you shouldn't do is I'm going to start sharing the template. Okay, so if you are up to the point we've reached in the essay writing process, you shouldn't start putting stuff here in the thesis statement yet, right? Maybe you're really, really confident about what the thesis statement is, and maybe you can put it there, but I advise against it. Because something might go wrong. You might realize something as you write the body, that some of these topic sentences are too hard to justify, or that maybe this objection is too hard to dismiss, right? So you don't want to commit to something that you might have to amend later. And that something is your thesis statement. You don't want to commit to a thesis statement yet because stuff might change. Now, what you do is, like kind of like Xandro was saying, you kind of like you can work on this over a couple of days and like flesh it out, right? So you come into here and I've highlighted this evidence here. You turn that evidence bullet point into a sentence or a couple of however many sentences you need to explain the problem of induction. And every time you use this evidence, you reference it. So you might have like something you've referenced, then a sentence of your own explaining it, and then something else from the book to do with Hume's problem of induction that you referenced, a sentence or two explaining it. Okay, until eventually you've explained Hume's problem of induction, and then you can like leave the linking sentence and start fleshing this out. I'm doing this like the same thing with these pieces of evidence. So it might just be like sentence, or straight to this point is the sentence, and then after that a sentence that's explaining stuff, because this is just a claim, it doesn't rely on induction, and then you might have to put a sentence after that explaining why. That sentence where you explain why it doesn't rely on induction might need a reference too. In fact, it would, because it's something in the lecture notes. It's not something you came up with yourself. Yeah, and then you'll do that with the second bullet point and the third bullet point. Then you'll like leave the linking sentence, and then you'll get down to the objection. You'll do exactly what you've done with body paragraph 1 and 2, except it's raising an objection, and dismissing it. Okay, and you'll reference what you need to reference. All right, but a way to do this, right, is because a way that I recommend to do this is not to do it in the template, or to do it in the template, but not the same document, because the template is something you made to keep looking back at to keep you on track, or to go back and amend if you ran into a roadblock when writing the body. You can go back and amend the template. And now the new template, because the one that you've got from amending the old one, is now what keeps you on track. So if you start trying to turn this document into the essay, then you're also losing the skeleton of the essay, the template that reveals the overall structure of the essay and keeps you on track and breaks it up into step-by-step little itty-bitty tasks. So what I do is I hit Control A, which copies everything in the document. Now I open a new document. And in the new document, I paste it all in, but I go up and I change the title because I know this isn't going to remain a template. Okay, essay draft 1. Okay, and then I do what I was explaining before, where I turn, these points of evidence into sentences that are going to fit into a paragraph nicely, and I flesh everything out and reference what I need. Okay, and this becomes a paragraph, right? Then I go on and do it here, like everything I just explained. Yeah, it's all the same. So I won't repeat myself. My point was just that you open a new document to copy and paste the essay template into, and you rename it that it's like your first draft, okay? Because you don't want to lose the original template you made. You want to keep being able to refer back to it to keep you on track, okay? Now let's say I've done all this, right? Then what I do is I might copy and paste this into a new document and name that one the second draft. Or, that's up to you. You can just keep amending this one and amending this one and amending this one. The reason why I put it in new documents, like I'll make a new document with draft 2, is not anything to do with making it easier. It's just because I think the process is nice where you can see the improvement from draft 1 to draft 2 to draft 3 to draft 4 and see it improving. I like to look at that. It just makes me feel good. That's the only reason I do it. If you can come up with a practical reason for doing it, I'd be interested to hear it, because at the moment it's purely a it's purely a desire. And in philosophy, it's a common belief among philosophers that desires are the kind of things that don't require reason and justification. Okay, you don't need a reason for preferring strawberry ice cream to chocolate. It's a desire, right? Desires aren't the kind of things we seek reasons for. All right, which is why I actually hold the belief that you don't need a reason to love someone. All right, love isn't the kind of thing that we might seek to justify by reason. It's loving someone as a person that you prefer to be around more than other people. Okay, you desire their presence more than other people's presence. So it's not the kind of thing I look to justify with reason. Anyways, so I'm just going to pause here and I'm going to stop sharing this screen to see the console better. And if people could give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to let me know whether they understood well or did not understand well. Great, excellent. You're all kicking goals. well-trained, highly performing soldiers. So that's what you do before you write your intro and your conclusion. And just to remind us, our motivation for fleshing out the body in the draft, in draft one, our motivation for doing that was that, you know, a reason for not writing the intro first was that in the intro, you're going to tell the reader what you're going to argue. And that's by giving them an explicit thesis statement. You know, I will argue that XYZ because ABC, something like that. Additionally, I will also argue that alpha, beta, gamma because, you know, psi, kappa, mu, or something like that, you know. And then finally, I will consider an objection that such and such and such and such, but I will dismiss it on the grounds that so and so and so and so, okay? That might be like a thesis statement. It can be anywhere between 1 to 3 sentences. So I'm going to go back to sharing the last document I was in. Okay, so when do I start doing the intro and conclusion? It's draft one. So when I finish my first draft, when I finish writing the body of the first draft, then I'm going to flesh out the introduction. And the introduction, that's when I'll include the thesis statement here. Now, the thesis statement I typically write in full, and that's the way it's kind of going to appear in the essay by this point, more or less. You know, I might tamper with it, but usually by now it's pretty decent because I've got a decent idea of what I'm able to argue. Understand, this looks like a template now, but we actually have a first draft here. So what happens in the first draft, you might find it easier to keep the titles, you might find it harder to keep the titles, but some stuff you can get rid of. Like here, I know it's 1,000 words, okay? That just helped me divide the word count up between intro, conclusion, and body paragraphs, etc. in the template. I don't need that. I get rid of this, right? I can't get rid of that because I haven't written the thesis statement yet. I get rid of this because I've done the first draft, so I know how many words I've spent on body paragraph one, all right? And I know whether it's taking me over the word count or whatever. I get rid of this, okay? And the conclusion I get rid of as well. Now, what I'll do now, sorry, before the intro and conclusion, the linking sentences will be filled in, okay? So, blah, blah. Yeah, because understand that the draft is finished. The first draft is finished. So these linking sentences will have been done because they're part of the body, right? And I said write the body before the introduction and the conclusion. So these linking sentences are done. So I'm doing this to make it look more essay-like, to show what's done and what's not done. Now, it's up to you whether you want to get rid of these titles here. That's your call. You might want to keep them there to remind you of, like, you know, preserve some of the structure. It depends. If you're confident with structure, you can delete them. But typically at some point, early on in the piece, I replace these sort of arbitrary titles with like whatever the topic is. Okay, so I just write inductivism up here, and then I write, and these titles aren't going to stay in the essay. They're not going to be in the final draft that I submit. So falsificationism, just to remind me where I discuss what, you know, what paragraph talks about what topic. So objection to Popper, stuff like this, right? Or objection to falsificationism. Okay, now I've filled in my linking sentences, and this body, it looks very essay-y. So I'm going to get rid of like these numbers here so that it looks more like it's an actual draft. You'll have to do a lot of that in your imagination, that it looks like a draft. Okay. And typically, I don't really get rid of these titles yet. To make sure that they don't end up in the final draft submitted, what I typically do is like something like this. Okay. So these will be like paragraphs of 300 words, but they'll be like, 5 words in each paragraph that are red. And that's so that I remember to delete them when I submit the the final result. See, so now it's starting to look a bit more like an essay. And I know I said like we'd get on to intro and conclusion, but we're not far from it. Okay, something like that. Right? Okay, now that we've written our body in the first draft, let's fill in our thesis statement. How do we do it? This is how it writes itself. First, you don't actually try to write the thesis statement. You take this, and you go, so when I said you take this, I meant the topic sentence of body paragraph 1, the topic sentence of my inductivism paragraph. Now I take the topic sentence of my second paragraph, my second body paragraph, falsificationism. All right, so I've got first topic sentence plus second topic sentence. You don't have to put these on separate lines. In fact, I'll put them all on one line so it looks more like a equation, right? And everything like this, which can't ever appear in the essay, I'm gonna like make bold and maybe put, make red and put like in a, like make it a bit bigger or something so that it gets deleted. It never ends up and stays in there and I get marked down for something to do with grammar. All right, so my first topic sentence plus my second topic sentence, and this isn't what your thesis statement has to be word for word, but then I do this. And then I go, now I'm just going to pause here and let you look at this and think about it. I'm not asking you to think about what to put in for what to fill in for question mark, question mark, question mark. I'm just asking you to reflect on the sense I meant earlier in which the introduction writes itself. Because this may have been surprising. A lot of students struggle with introductions. It's very difficult to get it wrong when you follow an approach like this. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a second and just return to the console because it's easier to navigate when I stop sharing the screen. And just, ask for some feedback or, what you think. You know, maybe you have some questions about what I've just done, or maybe what I've just done it wasn't clear in the introduction. We haven't got our thesis statement yet, but it's gonna come out automatically. Like it's gonna almost write itself. So I'm just gonna wait until I hear from some of you as to like thoughts, queries. Let's see if this doesn't make my shelf full. Not thick enough. One more. Maybe one more will do the trick. No, this isn't gonna work. This will do. Okay, so what do we think about that? So Mary says it's quite easy to write an intro now. Yeah. So before that, did you think it was going to be difficult to write an intro? Right. Yeah. So I usually do a whole summary. So I'm not saying this, I'm reading the chat. I usually do a whole summary of everything in my intro, and that makes it really long. Right. Well, a good intro is a short intro because a good essay is an essay with a lot of argument in it. And the longer the intro is, the less space there is for argumentation. So a good introduction is a short one. What do the others think? Any questions, comments? I'll tell you what, I wish I knew this in my first year. So you got used to writing introductions first? Yeah, never again. And that made it really hard to start? Yep, that makes sense. Angela dozed for a while because it's late. That's all good. This is going up on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it, and you will be, I think, excited when you see some of the stuff I put up there about how much, at least relieved about, how easy it is to write an introduction. Yeah, but you usually write the body paragraphs first and then the introduction. Yep, good. Great, yeah. The thing is, an introduction, of course, you literally have to write it, but in a sense, you don't really have to write it because it writes itself. So long as you've done everything else well, the essay writes itself. Okay, and when you really understand essay structure, it becomes something that makes essays easier to write. Okay, if you find sticking to essay structure difficult, it's probably because your understanding of essay structure is not so good, or maybe you're just new to essay writing. You know, like if you're new to essay writing and you have, you know, been taught well about essay structure, it might be difficult to stick to essay structure because it's very unfamiliar. But if essay structure, if if you've been writing essays for a while and it's difficult to stick to the essay structure, if you find that feels like an extra task, then you just need to understand essay structure better, because essay structure makes it easier to write an essay. Without conventions about essay structure, then you get all those issues like where to start, you know. But once you understand essay structure really well, part of what essay structure does is remove the problem of not knowing where to start, feeling like it's difficult to start somewhere. And that way you can focus on other things which are difficult. Because the most difficult part about an essay is figuring out what your view is and how you're going to argue it and how you're going to defend something, how you're going to attack some position, those sorts of things. Stuff to do with justifying your argument. That's the hardest part about, yeah, coming up with an argument. That's the hardest part about an essay. Shouldn't be like the structural stuff. Cool. How are you, Zandro? How are you feeling? Just gonna go back to sharing the Word doc, which is like the first draft. If you gave a thumbs up, I missed it. Sorry, but what I've done is I've copied all of the topic sentences into this thesis statement part of the intro. So understand that this whole body is already like in essay form. It's a first draft, so it's probably not great quality, but it's already like in essay form. It's already like in draft form, but just the body, okay, when we reach this point in the task. This, however, the introduction, that is still in template format when we get to this point, and so is the conclusion. So the way it looks here in the Word doc is exactly how it looks when you reach this point in the task, or when I do it. You know, you don't have to do everything the way I do it. But now I'm going to hit Control A, and I'll, you know, save this document, and then I'll hit a new document. And what happens is just sharing the new one. So I copy and paste it all in. And I rename the title because it's not draft 1, it's draft 2. And what I do is I backspace here and I write something like this. Go back to like my normal text size, which I think was 11. And I say, I argue that inductivism is an irrational scientific method because of Hume's problem of induction. Additionally, I argue that It's the second bit. So it's first topic sentence plus the second topic sentence. Second topic sentence is that I argue that falsificationism is a better alternative. You can just leave it there, say alternative to, I'm going to write this out because you'll see me do something in a second, a reason for leaving it in there. Additionally, I argue that falsificationism is a better alternative to inductivism. Then, let's say like, before I consider an objection, namely that, falsification so I'm just trying to find my objection. Yeah, falsification uses induction or relies on induction, however you want to say it. You change the wording up a little bit so you're not repeating yourself word for word. That falsification relies on induction. But here, some of it's a bit, like word for word. But, in my proofreading and editing, it's going to get changed, right? And it's word for word my own stuff, not word for word something in a source that I haven't referenced, okay? So, namely, that falsificationism, so I've got to be consistent. If I'm saying falsificationism throughout, I'll say falsificationism in each instance, relies on induction. I argue in response, you can say, I dismiss this objection because and now see in my thesis statement I said, however, this is mistaken, right? Well, whatever reason I had for it being mistaken, so I'll do something like this, insert reason here, right? All right, so now I've fleshed this out, this equals sign bit out, and I can do this. And I've got my thesis statement. And this is draft 2. Okay. Then I'll go through and I'll do a proofread and edit of all of this stuff maybe. But before I do that, I'll come down here and I know what the thesis statement is. And I know that in the conclusion, I restate my thesis statement, not word for word. It's going to be a little more fleshed out and detailed, not all that much. So it's going to be a little bit longer, but not all that much. And I'm going to come down here, restate thesis statement. This is something that should be in red so that I don't accidentally include it in the final submission. And so should this, I guess, because that's going to, it's all going to start looking a bit more like an essay. And I come down here, and before I do this, I'm just going to ask, like, can people give a thumbs up, if it appears to them that this is just starting to look like how an essay might look, just in terms of its shape. We went from something very templatey with lots of bullet points and titles and few sentences, and now something's getting fleshed out. Yeah, great. Thanks, all of you. Right? So this is starting to look like an essay, but I kind of just copied and pasted my thesis statement from the introduction. I copied and pasted it into my conclusion. It's not going to appear like that. I can't say in the conclusion, I argue that no, you already have argued. So I argued that inductivism is an irrational scientific method because, so I'm amending stuff, because of Hume's problem of induction. And you might have, things might be a little bit more detailed because you've explained stuff in the body, right? So because of Hume's problem of induction, or in other words, you can say because of the difficulty, because, you can say inductive inferences or induction cannot be justified by reason alone, by reason or experience, or you can say cannot be justified a posteriori or cannot be justified a priori or a posteriori. I've just stuck with simple language. Cannot be justified by reason or experience. And therefore cannot prove hypotheses true. Right? You see, because your reasons for thinking these things are going to have been already fleshed out and explained in the essay, which means you have more detail to draw upon when you restate your thesis statement. Okay, so now you can say, additionally, I argue, well, you're not about to argue, you've already argued because it's the conclusion. I argue that falsificationism is a better alternative to inductivism. This should have had a because in it, in the thesis statement, So, because it avoids the use of induction and instead aims to deductively falsify hypotheses. Okay, because thesis statements are of the form I will argue that ABC because XYZ. So I needed like a because there. Then you can say, finally, I consider an objection. Or you can say, I consider, we can make this a bit more succinct. I consider the objection. You can say, I consider an objection, an objection, right? And see these semicolons? Some say that one semicolon per essay. Semicolons are the kinds of things you want to avoid in essays, but they're not like absolutely not allowed. Okay. So I'm not going to go into when to use a semicolon. That's just grammar stuff. But yeah, they're best avoided in essays. I've been a bit naughty and used one here. And I can get rid of this namely part. So finally, I consider an objection that falsification relies on induction. And I can make these one sentence. Or I can just leave it. Okay. And I'll come back to my conclusion where I'm restating the thesis statement. And I'll need that because. Yeah. Yeah. So I argued that inductivism is an irrational scientific method because inductive inferences cannot be justified by reason or experience, and therefore cannot prove hypotheses true. So when you're proofreading and editing, you'd probably identify this sentence as a bit long-winded and wordy and want to make it more succinct, right? I'm not going to play around with that. It's a draft and you keep polishing and you keep making it more succinct. Then additionally, I argued that falsificationism is a better alternative to inductivism because it avoids the use of induction. And instead, you'd probably need a comma there, I'm not doing my spelling and grammar check yet. I'm writing garbage and turning it into gold, right? Step by step. Aims to deductively falsify hypotheses, right? Finally, I consider an objection that falsificationism relies on induction. I dismissed this objection because, Finally, I considered past tense because you've already done it, right? An objection that falsificationism relies on induction. I dismissed this objection because insert whatever your reasons were, whatever your justification was. Right? And that's our conclusion. And that's pretty much all it needs to be. Now, that introduction is done. It's like 61 words. Right? You might flesh it out at the start with some stuff like this. So when we go into draft 3, this is our second draft. Okay, so we would save this. And then we're almost done. Come up here. And now I'll call this draft 3. And then here, what I'm going to do is flesh this thing out. And I might say, like I'll just give like 1 or 2 sentences introducing the topic, like I'll put it in black because it would really be something in the essay, not something I'm going to delete later. So I'm not going to write it in red, like 1 or 2 sentences that introduce the topic, right? I might say like, inductivism is a kind of scientific method that aims to inductively prove hypotheses true. On the other hand, falsificationism is a kind of scientific method that, rather than trying to prove hypotheses true, aims to deductively falsify them. See, there's like 2 sentences to give a little bit of context and introduce the topic. Then, thesis statement. Hit him in the jaw. Solid with a thesis statement. Explicit as all hell. Like one of those people at a football game streaking across the field. It's not subtle. It's explicit. Nothing's implicit about it. Right? Cool. Now, things are going pretty well. Stuff is pretty fleshed out. The conclusion is done. And all I'm doing is proofreading and editing. So I might do this. Get rid of these titles. Right? And maybe you want to leave these things in that so you know the structure of things, like, what's your thesis statement, what's your topic sentence, what's your evidence and all that. But, this is your intro. That's your first body paragraph. That's your second body paragraph. That's your third body paragraph, your objection paragraph, and this is your conclusion. And, you know, we have an essay, and you're going to have to get rid of all of these red sentences, like these red words. So I might start getting rid of them now in my third draft. Doesn't have to be the third one. It's when you feel comfortable doing it. But let's say I feel comfortable now, and I'm going to get rid of these. And maybe you make a mistake and you miss one of them, and it survives into the next draft. Well, we are good soldiers who have a redundancy plan for every major thing that can go wrong. And in this instance, that was writing the text in red. I'm just going to open the chat to see if anyone's asked any questions. Okay, great. All right. Then I'll go back to sharing the screen. Cool. So and copy and paste this. Right. And then we make another document. We put it in there. Or we just keep working in this one and proofreading and editing. And how do we proofread and edit? Well, if you've got a printer, that's the best. And you know, you might prefer to keep it all electronic because you don't want to use paper, but printing off a copy does make it easier. What you do is now when you want to proofread and edit and you're trying to improve the quality of it with each time, like we've written the thing now, we're not writing anything, we're just reading it and then amending stuff, making it more succinct, scanning for grammar problems, all that kind of thing. Getting a sense of how it sounds to the reader, whether some sentences sound clunky and don't fit together, all that kind of stuff. What you do is if you're willing to print it, you print it off so you have a hard copy and you go through and you red pen it and you put all the comments in and stuff that you might think you'd change. You cross out words that are redundant, all that kind of stuff. And you don't do this bit by bit. You do it wholesale. So you get away from your laptop and you don't type anything. You don't change anything. You go away, you read the whole thing, the hard copy, and red pen the crap out of it. You mark it yourself, kind of thing, like not actually to the rubric and give it a grade, but I mean, you know, you do this. And how do you know when to red pen stuff? And you know, when sentences don't sound very nice and they don't flow. When you read them in your head, they sound so much different. They sound so much better than if you were to read them out loud. So you go somewhere where you're not embarrassed to read out loud, maybe you're by yourself, whatever, and you read your essay out loud. And when something sounds like it doesn't fit, you red pen it. Or when you notice something with your eyes, you red pen it. And a lot of what you're doing is just listening to how you sound, right? Then after you've done the whole thing and red penned it, you come back and you make all the amendments in the next draft. Maybe it's the same document, and well, maybe you create a new Word doc and copy and paste it all in, but you do it, right? And you do that as many times until you're happy with what it is, right? Okay, and then let's just say when we get up to that point, we're up to draft N for some natural number N, right? Let's say we're up to like our sixth draft, fifth draft, whatever. It's not like we've written an essay 6 times. Okay, it's just like we're just polishing it from draft to draft. Okay, so don't think like, oh wow, 6 drafts. No, it's just like copy and pasting the previous draft into a new Word doc and making changes to improve it. Okay. What I'm going to do here is like, let's say I'm up to draft N and I'm happy. Okay. Now what I do is I start referencing. And I notice that here I need some evidence that I need to cite. And the way that I look for these little reminders to reference, maybe you like to reference as you include it. That's up to you. I don't, because I think that maybe I might not I might not need something in the end. I might get rid of it or whatever. I just reference at the end, but I go Control F, and this is how I find everything that needs a reference. I go bracket S, and I read here, and I see, oh, 8 results, and I look at them all to make sure that they're actually reference things. So I see, oh, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, 5, 6. So 6 of them are actual reference things, and some of them are just, you know, a bracket followed by an S. So I know that I have to hit 6 of them. Okay. So now I go through and I reference first, and then I delete that. So however you want to cite this, right, and use your, you know, if you're working in Word, you'll use the referencing software to manage all the sources in here. Okay, now, this is all stuff I'll do tomorrow when I actually write an essay, a 1,000-word essay, on a completely different topic to this. I'll just give I haven't decided on the topic yet. I'll decide tomorrow, and then I'll read for an hour or two, and then write the essay. Okay, so I referenced this. Let's say I referenced it. All right, and let's say I was using footnotes. And I go down here if I'm using footnotes, and I make sure, yep, everything's how I like it, right? And really, I mean end notes. Rather than footnotes, end notes. End notes is what you want to use because it makes them appear at the end of the document rather than the bottom of the page. That's just a convention that philosophers like, but you don't have to use this referencing system. So I'm going to go insert end note, and hang on. See how it's an I? I want it to be a 1. So I'll hit Control Z. I'll go here. And I need to change the format of end notes to numbering. Right. Okay. Insert an end note. Now it's a 1. Okay. I'll insert what the source was. And then I'll delete this. Okay. I'll just do another example, and then just imagine that I did it for all of them. Okay. Bam. Right. Here's a quick way of doing it. You just control F your way around. So actually, I'll do all of them because it's really quick anyways. All right. That highlights them all in yellow, the ones I need to do when I have this Control F function open. So I don't end up including one of these source things in my essay by accident. Hit Control F again. You know, insert the end note, and then when it goes down here, you say the source you got it from. This one was in red, shouldn't be. But yeah, insert end note, bam, hit Control F again, finds the next one, which is one that has been done and needs deleting. And if this isn't the last one, let's just pretend it is and pretend I haven't missed any. And just imagine I've gotten all of them. I hit Control F again, and I hit enter, and I realize none of them are sort of source placeholders, right? So now I've done my referencing, and then what I do is I hit enter until I come to a second page. And on that second page, a completely separate page, I put my reference list or my bibliography. Cool. And if it's a bit confusing, that's just kind of the referencing convention for this kind, Chicago 16, like the endnotes or footnotes style. yeah, typically, you know, it says, you know, like this source one here tells us that this piece of evidence here came from that source there, right? But you still need a master list of all your sources down here, right? So I'm gonna just scroll out, right? And there I'm going to just like quickly insert a random reference list so it looks more like an essay. Bibliography, insert bibliography. There are no current sources in the document. Okay, so I'm gonna like just move some random ones across. I'm gonna like manage sources, and let's say that I bloody had a bunch of stuff like that. Okay, cool, right? It's just sometimes hard to click something because the Zoom console will like come down as I hover near it. So yeah, if ever I'm like just chilling here for like a couple of seconds, that's why. All right. Now, bam, there it is. So imagine that this page here was like, you know, a few more pages long, 1,000 words worth of essay writing, and then the endnotes are here, and I've filled in my little reference list. I deliberately picked like a bunch of philosophy of science things to put in there. And you know, you can see that one. There's one of the books I recommended for introduction to philosophy of science, if you're interested after this course and you still want to keep reading. So I'm going to just take a minute or two to let you observe this and reflect on this and think of any questions you might have. I'm going to make a coffee that's going to take me like 1 or 2 minutes, and come back to see how you're doing. But yeah, like we're pretty much at the end. That's it. So I'm just going to let you look at this for a while. And I really want you to reflect on, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second and show you what we started with. Just to show you how far we've come. Look at that. That's the template we began with. Doesn't look anything like an essay. This is just something we use to keep us on track, give us like something like an algorithm kind of for writing an essay. You know, you would start here, like topics, find your topic sentence for body paragraph 1, write the evidence in there that led you to adopting that view. You know, you're kind of just filling out a skeleton, and it's kind of a piece of crap, right? Now, I'm going to scroll out so you can see the whole thing. Remember, that's what we had. That's all we had in the beginning, right? Now I stop sharing this, and I'm going to share the last thing we ended up with. And whoa. Golly jeepers, Jilly Willikers, Batman. Okay, so now I'm going to let you reflect on that and kind of see how it's really just like bit by bit. It's not like you sit in front of a computer and all of a sudden all these thoughts pour out of your head and it becomes an essay and you write it. over like, a session or something. You just fill in little bits at a time in the skeleton of an essay template as you're going from document to new document to draft to draft to draft. And you end up with something that looks like that. So yeah, I'm gonna make that coffee, or maybe get a glass of water, probably coffee. In fact, that's the end. And if you need to leave, I'm going to, I'll come back, and if no one's here, I'll just end the Zoom meeting and then start uploading this. But I'm gonna like take a 5 or 10 minute break. Then I'm gonna come back, and if anyone's still here, see if they have questions, any comments, or anything like that. But if you are taking off, just like say it in the chat. Like catch you later or something like that. So I know not to wait around for you. That's all. And yeah, for those who have stayed the whole time, I hope this helps. Everyone is going to see it that wants to, anyways. It's all recorded. It's all recording. I'm going to make sure. Just going to stop sharing for a second. Yep, still recording. Okay, and I'll go back to sharing that screen. But could people give me a thumbs up just so they know that we are like, I'm ducking off for a 5 or 10 minute break. So thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no.